Chapter 12:16. What? Lin Chongqing's pupils shrank and his heart turned cold. In the next moment, he roared and pounced forward, but he only saw a huge hole at the bottom of the metal plate. At the same time, the ground behind him suddenly cracked open, and 7 or 8 blood-red tentacles rose from inside, waving in the air like poisonous vines. This is the mechanical heart? Dean's upper body extended out from the shoulder of the origami girl, like the genie in Aladdin's magic lamp. The lower part of his waist was elongated, and he held a sparkling and translucent Rubik's cube in his hand. This was the thing that the Demon Emperor and Crimson Moon had been searching for. He knew that this was the crystallization of the demonic worm's wisdom, and it contained extremely high-end demonic worm technology. The entire Federation's network system was driven by this small piece of mechanical heart. If this thing was embedded in a spaceship, it could allow the spaceship to travel between the stars and jump through space. On the planet where the demonic worm resided, there were very few such top-notch technological products, and this piece was one of the most outstanding pieces, because this was the mechanical heart that was configured on the exclusive spaceship of the demonic worm. Give it back to me. Although he knew that such words were meaningless, Lin Chongqing could not help but roar in desperation. Dean ignored him, and turned over the mechanical heart in his hand, gently twisting one of the surfaces, only to hear a clicking sound. Is this the restart? You! Lin Chongqing was so angry that his body trembled, and he clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug deep into his flesh. Dean looked at the shadow of Lin Chongqing, and saw that the shadow disappeared with a clicking sound. He knew that the part of Lin Chongqing's memory that he had plundered did not deceive him. The restart of the mechanical heart required the restoration of 108 disordered star map. His method seemed simple, but in fact, he had combined part of Lin Chongqing's memory, and found a shortcut to quickly restart the mechanical heart. When the mechanical heart was rebooted, all the Federation systems would also restart, just like restoring the factory settings, and the virus Lin Chongqing inside would naturally be completely erased. What was alive now was Lin Chongqing's memories that had been injected into the origami's body. To be precise, Lin Chongqing was already dead, and this origami was only living in Lin Chongqing's way. You really shouldn't talk so much in the face of death. Dean shook his head and smiled. If you had gone to get this thing and used the mechanical warriors to stop us, then you could have bought some time. Unfortunately, you wanted to play tricks with me. You gave me time to decompose the metal structure of the base and assimilate it. How could you be so stupid? You! Lin Chongqing's eyes were blood-red and his body was trembling with anger. Although Dean's words were extremely sarcastic, but he knew that what Dean said was true. If he had rushed over right from the start, he might have had a chance to obtain the machinery heart. If he had the computing assistance of the Cortex Prime, he could think of thousands of possibilities in an instant and choose the best method through probability. However, without the aid of the mainframe's calculations, his own thinking became incredibly slow. He could only rely on his own intuition to come up with the best solution, and not the best solution in the end. Is there anything else you want to say? Forget it, I'll see it myself. Dean sent a telepathic message to the origami girl. The latter understood and grinned. She raised her hand and a large number of tentacles shot out from the ground towards Lin Chongqing. The tentacles filled the entire base and shot towards Lin Chongqing. I'm not willing! I'm not willing! Lin Chongqing let out an angry roar. His hair flew in the air, growing several meters long and shooting out like countless steel needles. He pushed his hands forward, and his fingers turned into earthen yellow flying snakes that twisted and bit at the incoming blood-colored tentacles. The origami girl looked at him with a smile. She didn't see how she moved, but the tentacles that were fighting with the flying snakes shot out silver threads and black mist. They surrounded Lin Chongqing and shrouded him in darkness. If there is hell, I'll wait for you in hell. Lin Chongqing's furious roars came from within the black fog. He was like a trapped beast that was screaming at the top of its lungs. Dean faintly smiled. With your wisdom, you shouldn't believe in heaven and hell. Break for me. In the black fog, Lin Chongqing's entire body was entangled by the silver threads. The black gas that permeated the silver threads gradually nibbled away at the cells in his body, trying to invade his body and plunder it. He gathered all the strength in his body and pushed, but he found that the silver threads expanded as he pushed, but they were still stuck to his body. Despair, grief, regret, and ferociousness. Lin Chongqing's heart was already in despair. His outstanding wisdom and rationality had made him proud, but at this moment, he sadly discovered that he could only be one step ahead of ordinary people. He was more clear and rational about his current situation, so he was in despair earlier and gave up struggling. Without the power of the mechanical heart, the power of his own demonized body was completely incomparable to Dean. Until now, he still thought that the origami monster was Dean's body. He felt the fear of cannibalism from the silver thread. It seemed that the origami monster was the natural enemy of his body. He suddenly thought about why the Demon King would run away. It should be because the origami monster was a purebred origami. How did you know that I would be here? Did you take away the part of my memory? Impossible. There is no such thing in my memory. I've built this new base. Lin Chongqing didn't resist the erosion of his body. He shouted towards the outside of the black mist. He knew that he was going to die. He smiled. Blame yourself for being too careless. I wouldn't have been able to find you if you had gone to the other bases in my memory. But I guess you wouldn't have chosen to go to those bases. You would have built a new base. I know the location of the other bases. Although I can temporarily hide, but if I can't find you, then I will go to those places to search. So it is necessary to build a new base. Where is the most suitable place to build a new base? You have to think about it carefully. Since you are forced to build a new base, it means that the situation is the worst. So the location of the new base is not suitable to be built in the main city where the 4 major families are located. It is also not suitable to be built in bustling places. The Federation must have fallen into the hands of others. It is easy to be exposed in bustling places. Therefore, you can only choose a deserted place. Unfortunately, you have built too many bases. In that memory, you have considered many cities. Only this snowy mountain city and 7 other remote cities were not considered. Therefore, according to that memory, you can choose one of the 8 cities as your new base, avoiding the cities that you have considered in that memory. Snow Mountain City is remote and the snowy mountain is suitable for storing nuclear weapons. The reason why I found this city was mainly because of the invasion of the demons. Among the 8 cities, only this city didn't send mechanical soldiers to participate in the war. They didn't directly surrender either. Instead, they relied on some weak city defense forces and a group of hot-blooded mecha operators to fight. You are trying to avoid arousing suspicion, so there are no mechanical soldiers stationed in this city. Lin Chongqing's face turned ugly. But there are no mechanical soldiers stationed in other cities. Why did you think of this city? Of course it is the terrain. Dudian smiled. Snow Mountain City is the furthest from the host city on the map. Lin Chongqing's heart ached. He understood how big his mistake was. Although Dudian's words sounded simple, but the combination of the 2 points was enough to arouse suspicion. You have ignored the place, but your enemy will firmly remember it for you. Now you shouldn't be able to spontaneously combust. Dudian looked at Lin Chongqing's body, which was penetrated by the black gas. The silver threads were like needles that pierced into his body. As long as he gave the order, the origami girl would swallow him. Ha ha! Lin Chongqing smiled. He wanted to say something, but Dean didn't give him the chance. Dean sent a message to the origami girl. Lin Chongqing only had enough time to let out a muffled groan as his body was quickly surrounded by darkness. The The darkness seemed to come out from his body and shrouded him as it gradually shrunk. It's not that the villain dies because of talking too much. It's the dead that are called villains. The survivor is the protagonist. Dudian muttered to himself as he looked at Lin Chongqing, who was completely engulfed by the darkness. He slightly shook his head and looked at the origami girl. Did you keep his memory? I kept it, the origami girl replied. Dudian nodded and glanced at the ruins of the base. Let's go out. The origami girl immediately took his body out of the underground base. They stood at the top of the snowy mountain. The cold wind was biting cold and the sky was white. No matter how outstanding he was when he was alive, he died like a dog. Maybe the future generations will beautify this story and tell how tragic and brave he was. Dudian couldn't help but sigh as he killed a sly fox who had lived for more than 200 years. But I'm here so he can only be a clown in the history of the Federation. The history of the Federation should be changed. Chapter 12-17. Northern Federation, Barbarian Land. A crimson forest stretched for hundreds of miles. The trees in the forest were fiery red, as if they were burning. The monsters that lived in the forest had blood-red fur and scales, and the venom in their fangs contained fire poison. This crimson forest was famous in the Federation. It was regarded as one of the many forbidden areas. The monsters in the forest were generally around rank 7. It was said that in the center of the forest, there was a top rank 11 monster, comparable to the king of humans. At this moment, on a giant tree in the center of the forest, the heart of the tree was hollowed out. There was a tree hole inside. In the tree hole, there were wooden beds, mirrors, bedding, and other items. In addition to these daily necessities, there were also some strange metal machines. In front of one of the instruments that looked like a telescope, a tall, fair-skinned young man was sitting there, adjusting the instrument in his hand and unscrewing one of the nuts. Suddenly, he paused and looked out of the window of the tree hole as if he had sensed something. Outside was the shadow of a fiery red forest, extending into the distance, and at the end of the distance was where the Federation was. Did something happen? The young man frowned. His eyes were a bit dignified. He immediately stopped adjusting the instrument in his hand and turned to the bottom of the bed to find a metal box. It looked like a pencil box, but its hardness was higher than diamond. He authenticated the fingerprint to unlock the box. The box opened. Inside was a strip of metal. In the middle of the strip was a miniaturized screen with a red asterisk pattern. His pupils shrank. Although he had a feeling in his heart, it was still hard to believe when it really happened. He took out the metal strip and inserted it into a machine next to him. Soon, a lot of data appeared. He entered a code, and the chaotic data quickly combined into several video screens and a lot of information. He slowly browsed. For a long time. After reading all the information, he slowly closed his eyes. Finally, he knew what kind of shocking change had happened in the distant Federation. God is actually born. He closed his eyes and muttered to himself. After a moment, he slowly opened his eyes. Since God is born, it proves that the research of the great sage demonic insect is correct. As long as I follow this direction, I will eventually become a god. No matter what, as long as I live, there will always be a chance. Dean, I remember you. I don't know what the battle between the two gods will be like in the future. Haha. His eyes looked in the direction of the Federation. His cold eyes showed a bit of expectation. After killing Lin Chongqing and rebooting the Federation's mainframe, Dean held the mechanical heart in his hand. He felt that the entire Federation had fallen into his hands, and this made him very excited. With the Federation as his supply station, and the origami girl fighting for him, it was only a matter of time before he could seize control of the Empire. He would be able to order everyone to look for Aisha in the Empire after he took over the Empire. Soon, I'll see you soon. Dean's mind appeared Lisa's face. Her sweet smile and indifferent expression after turning into the undead were so moving. Dean looked at the origami girl. Give me his memories. Yes, Mom. The girl nodded obediently and raised her white and slender palm. Her palm suddenly split open like a petal, revealing a lump of bloody flesh. This bloody scene was in sharp contrast with her pure and beautiful face. Dean was already used to it. He had sensed the name of the origami girl from their spiritual communication, so he didn't care too much about it. According to human aesthetics, even if he gave birth to her, he should be the father. However, in her worldview, gender had no meaning. If she wanted to give birth to a child, she could reproduce monogamously or change her gender at will. God was omnipotent, and that naturally included sex change. Looking at the lump of Lin Chongqing's brain, Dean used Crimson Moon's Dream Breeder ability to read its memories. Through the previous communication, Dean already knew what happened after his spontaneous combustion. He also knew why he was in a symbiotic relationship with the origami girl. When the girl was born, she swallowed his body. Her purpose wasn't to eat him, but to decompose his body into countless cells. Then she would use the special structure of the girl's body to store the cells separately to prevent his genes from spontaneous combustion. As for the countless memories of Crimson Moon and Bielello, they came from the information left by the origami girl after she swallowed Crimson Moon. Unlike his situation, Crimson Moon was completely swallowed and digested by her, and all the broken memories were the signs of being swallowed. While reading these memories, he also learned all of Crimson Moon's abilities. In addition to her Dream Breeder ability and Bolo's Dark Realm ability, he also learned the abilities of many other legendary monsters. In the imperial capital of the Empire, there were not only 8 legendary monsters as recorded in the Sylvia Giant Wall Monster Atlas, but there were 1,362 legendary monsters. This number included all the legendary monsters that were active in the Giant Wall area. Many of them were already extinct, suspected to have died or evolved into other monsters. These were called ancient monsters. The number of legendary monsters that were found by adventurers in the wilderness was less than half of the number recorded in the Atlas. Even so, there were still 500 or 600 of them. Each legendary monster's growth potential was at least at the Dominator level, and a little below the middle could evolve to the Abyss level. As for the best among them, it wasn't rare for them to evolve to the King level. There were even some monsters that had evolved beyond the level of legendary monsters and were classified as supreme monsters by the Empire. Each of these supreme monsters had the power to shake the Giant Wall. During the establishment of the Empire, there were many monsters that destroyed the Giant Wall. Every monster that could destroy the Giant Wall was classified as a Forbidden Level Supreme Monster. However, the supreme magical beasts were not the most terrifying monsters on the Empire's exploration list. Among the many legendary demonic beasts, Crimson Moon had used her special privileges to study the abilities of over 100 legendary demonic beasts after pledging allegiance to the Demon Emperor. However, it wasn't always better to have more abilities. After all, in a real battle, the decisive blow was usually the fatal blow. However, the abilities of these legendary monsters had their own strength. They could be combined to create more advanced abilities. This was the purpose of Crimson Moon's painstaking study. At this moment, the abilities of these legendary monsters were all in Dean's mind. He used Crimson Moon's specialty, Dream Breeder, to delve into Lin Chongqing's memories. This memory was the Demon Emperor and Crimson Moon's main goal this time. With Lin Chongqing's erudition and understanding of science, he could completely help Dean conceive more and more powerful abilities. The strength of God mainly depended on the strength of his ability. Therefore, God needed to be omniscient. Although Lin Chongqing had the wisdom close to God, his body couldn't keep up with the profound abilities. Although he knew how to construct them, he couldn't do as he wished. It was like a person who hadn't practiced the splits before. The origami girl's body was extremely flexible. She could complete any difficult movement. As long as the posture was taught to her, she could immediately learn it. The Demon Emperor and Crimson Moon's body structure was very close to the Origami Girl's body. Like Dean's original physical fitness, they were at the demigod level. If they added Lin Chongqing's knowledge, they could barely display the combat power close to God's level. It was enough to kill all the kings. As for the true God, in the eyes of the demon insect, Lin Chongqing, and the demon emperor, it was just an existence that they pursued and yearned for. It was an ultimate form of life that could be achieved in theory. Even if the scientific theory of human could cross the solar system, explore the universe, and colonize various planets, it would take many years for humans to reach the moon. As for the colonization of the solar system, it was even more unattainable. It would take countless years. Chapter 12:18. Dean sorted out Lin Chongqing's memories. There was a huge amount of information inside. It was 1,000 times more than the memories of ordinary people. Even Crimson Moon's memories from the Origami Girl was far less than 1% of Lin Chongqing's memories. Crimson Moon's memories had a lot of useless hypnotic memories woven by Boelo. Even so, it paled in comparison to Lin Chongqing's memories. Although Lin Chongqing had lived for more than 200 years, his memory capacity was only twice that of an ordinary person's. However, Lin Chongqing's days in the virtual world were too colorful. Through the virtual world, he could read anything that was happening in the Federation. All the major news, the private affairs of certain influential figures, or the dirty dealings of the underworld were all seen by him. For ordinary people, most of the days of life were monotonous and repetitive. They would wake up, eat, finish day after day's work, and rest. They would be like a clockwork robot. It was extremely boring. But for Lin Chongqing, every day was different. He could see interesting things at every moment. When he encountered a problem, he could think of thousands of ideas in a second with the help of the AI. Although he had discarded the useless ideas, Dean dug out all of them when he read his memories. They were scattered and needed to be sorted out slowly. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. Dean finally accepted all of Lin Chongqing's memories. He knew what kind of person Lin Chongqing was from an all-round perspective. There was even a moment when he thought of himself as Lin Chongqing. However, in order to prevent Lin Chongqing from using Bo Luo's technique, he had made preparations in advance. He quickly came to his senses and felt that everything that Lin Chongqing had experienced was like a passing cloud. His feelings were no longer as deep. The blood moon is coming, the demonic insects will reappear. Dean squinted his eyes and looked up at the sky. It was noon. Heavy snow was falling from the sky. The snowflakes were sticky with nuclear dust. Although the host city was far away from here, the impact of the nuclear explosion had affected more than half of the Federation's environment. Several days of heavy snow had shrouded the Federation. The nuclear radiation in the snowflakes had a great impact on newborns and pregnant women. This year, the Federation had given birth to millions of children, and most of them were deformed. Although it was broad daylight, Dean's supervision could see a silver moon looming in the sky. Who would have thought that the moon that had illuminated the earth for countless years was the source of their nightmares? Lin Chongqing had been preparing for the descent of the blood moon for more than a decade. This was the calamity that Lin Chongqing was most afraid of. Every time the moon turned crimson, the murderers that had nearly wiped out humanity, the demonic insects, would once again descend upon Earth, and the place they would descend upon would be the Federation. If Lin Chongqing was the demonic insect's experimental subject, then the entire Federation was the demonic insect's incubator. The billions of citizens of the Federation were not Lin Chongqing's private property, but the demonic insect's private property. The demonic insects were the true rulers of the Federation. As for Lin Chongqing, he was just a substitute that the demonic insects had snuck out of Earth to take over. If the demonic insects knew that he was still alive, they would definitely reactivate the machinery hive mind and kill him. The one that replaced the demonic insects to manage the Federation was actually the AI. However, Lin Chongqing had already invaded and destroyed the intelligence system constructed by the demonic insects, and the current intelligence system was a complete replica created by Lin Chongqing. It was worth mentioning that the replica intelligence system had managed to deceive the demonic insect sage, who had come to examine it during the 2 previous blood moons and demonic insects' descent. Now it was the 3rd time that the blood moon descended. Lin Chongqing felt that it would be more difficult for him to deceive it this time. Therefore, he had been preparing for more than a decade to seize the bodies of the Demon Emperor or the 2 Dragon Lords of the Fire Dragon Country to become a god. In this way, even if the demonic insect led an army to descend, it would be difficult to cause any harm to him. Instead, it would become his prisoner. The Demon Emperor and Candle Dragon Lord's attack on the Federation was actually secretly facilitated by him. Dean only knew about this after reading Lin Chongqing's memory. He couldn't help but be aghast. If it wasn't for him and Crimson Moon's existence, the Demon Emperor and Candle Dragon Lord would have all been buried here. Unfortunately, when Lin Chongqing's plan was about to be completed, he discovered Dean, who had sneaked into the Federation. Therefore, Lin Chongqing slowed down his plan and prepared to become a god through Dean's body. If he could borrow Dean's body to become a god, then when the Demon Emperor and Candle Dragon Lord arrived, he would have absolute confidence in hunting them down. Unfortunately, Dean's body was incomplete. In the later battle, the Origami Girl, a true god, was born, which caused all of Lin Chongqing's plans to fall short. No matter how much I calculate, I can't calculate every unknown change in this world, Dean thought. Now that Lin Chongqing was dead, the person that the demonic insects had to deal with when they descended was him. He couldn't recreate the AI like Lin Chongqing to deceive the demonic insect. He could only fight. But he wasn't worried. From Lin Chongqing's memory, although the demonic insect was strong, it wasn't a match for a god. This was the ultimate life that the demonic insects and the origami pursued. In other words, even for the demonic insects and the origami, this was the ideal state that they pursued, but they were far from reaching it. Therefore, the Origami Girl that was born in his heart was undoubtedly the most powerful existence in this world, the most terrifying life. Moreover, this life was under his command, which meant that he held the most powerful power in this world. After reading Lin Chongqing's memories, the mysterious veil of this world had been completely lifted in front of him. In the past, when he was just an ordinary person or a hunter, he had always felt that this world was unfathomable and that he could not see the source behind it. But now, he knew everything. The demonic insects are divided into 2 races, the ice demon insects and the flame demon insects. The ice demon insects control the Federation and study the mysteries of becoming a god. The flame demon insects rule the Fire Dragon Country and also study the mysteries of becoming a god. The origami occupy the central region and also want to solve the mysteries of becoming a god. They desire immortality and coexist with the universe. The war in the old era was too tragic. The 7 continents were torn apart by the bombardment of nuclear bombs. Humans started the Doomsday Plan and were ready to perish together with the invading demonic insects. Unfortunately, they failed to do so. They only made the surface environment worse. The small fragments of the islands have sunk under the claws of the sea monsters. The large continents are also gradually shrinking. The former big continents have shrunk to less than the territory of a big country. The human countries, the Federation, the Empire, and the Fire Dragon Country are divided into 3 parts. The north is the Corpse Country ruled by the mutated Corpse King. It's a forbidden zone for living people. Chapter 12:19. In the Doomsday Plan of the Old Era, humans didn't kill the demonic insects. They didn't perish together with the demonic insect. Humans were lucky enough to survive. They tried their best to reproduce, but in the end, they became the test subjects of the demonic insects and the origami. If the leaders and scientists who made this plan knew about this result, I wonder what kind of lament they would make. However, the nuclear explosion had caused great damage to the demonic insects and the origami. Although they weren't completely destroyed, they were greatly weakened. The main forces had evacuated from the Earth, and only the base was left to continue the experiment. The world that Dean saw from Lin Chongqing's memory was completely different from the world that he saw in Sylvia. In Sylvia, people believed in the origami. There were countless bards who sang praises for the origami. They sang about its virtues and their own stories and legends. The giant wall was engraved with the statue of the goddess of Sylvia to protect people from the invasion of the demonic insects. All of these made people firmly believe that the origami used to fight against the demonic insects for mankind. They were the protectors of mankind. Even the history of the giant wall was recorded as such. But in fact, the origami did fight against the demonic insect. They fought fiercely, but it wasn't for mankind. It was for the delicious cake that was the earth. At the beginning of the war, the demonic insects invaded from outer space. However, the invasion of the origami was silent. They infiltrated into the human society in the form of parasite. Even the people who participated in the Doomsday Plan were guided by the origami. In Dean's impression, the origami were gluttonous, ferocious creatures that devoured everything. But in fact, the origami race did have the ability to absorb most of the materials and convert them into their own life functions. But they weren't stupid. On the contrary, they had an extremely high IQ. If the IQ was measured in the human way, then the origami's intelligence was generally higher than that of humans. However, their planet was too barren. They needed too many materials for their own activities. That was why they had to plunder other planets. It was like if one day the population of the Earth expanded and the food produced wasn't enough for humans to eat and drink. There would be famine and a large number of people would starve to death. But before such a situation occurred, countries would develop family planning policies in advance to prevent such a tragic thing. However, the origami were different from the humans. They would suffer from famine as well, but they would not starve to death so easily. Every origami could absorb anything and everything around them. They would eat trees, water, and soil. They would eat everything on the planet, just like a swarm of locusts. Moreover, the lifespan of origami was extremely long. If they did not encounter any natural disasters, they could live for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. That was why the origami had no choice but to kill each other. However, the origami were not fools. Once they had killed each other to a certain number, they would turn their attention to the vast universe. In order to survive, the origami had no choice but to plunder non-stop in order to survive. Meanwhile, the planet where the demonic insects were located was the first planet that the origami had ever explored. However, the demonic bugs were not to be underestimated. The ice demonic bug and the flame demonic bug occupied the two sides of the planet. They had been fighting each other since they were born, and the long struggle had prompted them to continuously evolve, learn, and become stronger and stronger. Therefore, even though the origami were terrifying, they would still be at a great disadvantage if they were to cross planets to fight on the planet of the demonic insect. Furthermore, the demonic insects had a very strong reproductive ability. They were even faster than the rabbits on Earth. However, the difference between the demonic insects and the rabbits was that the reproduction of the demonic insects depended on their own will. When they did not want to reproduce, they would not reproduce at all. Just like that, the war between the origami and the demonic insects lasted for a long time. Until the origami obtained a conjecture from the demonic insects. This conjecture made the origami race completely excited. It was as if a new world had been opened for them, a new path of survival. That conjecture was to become a god. According to the definition of the demonic insects, gods were immortal, and had the ability to absorb all kinds of energy or substances and convert them into their own life force. They could survive in any harsh environment. Theoretically, even a black hole that could devour light could not destroy them. Gods were omnipotent. They did not have the concept of life because they were eternal. This conjecture had inspired the Aragami's hope of survival. They no longer needed to spend a lot of resources to travel back and forth between the demonic insects and their own planet to transport food back and forth. They could evolve themselves. Even if they could not become an unrealistic god, they could evolve themselves to be more adaptable to the environment and the universe. They could even survive in space and on planets without life. So the Aragami race began their journey of evolution. After a long time, they finally evolved to the point where they barely solved the problem of survival. However, at that time, the Aragami began to yearn for the eternity that the demonic insects were pursuing. So they frequently attacked the demonic insects' planet. The demonic insects' planet was already at its limit after years of war. Seeing that it was about to collapse, the great sages of the demonic insects and demonic insects had to work together to discuss countermeasures and find a way out. So they migrated their spaceships and wandered in space, preparing to migrate to a new planet that was suitable for living. When they were migrating, they did not notice that the Aragami were secretly following them. When it came to exploring the stars, the Aragami were more advanced and professional than the demonic insect. After all, in order to survive, they had been searching for a new planet that was suitable for living even before the demonic insects stepped out of the ancestral planet. During their long wandering, the demonic insects found the visitor signal that the humans had sent to the outer solar system. Through the feedback of the signal, they locked onto the position of the solar system and found Earth. Countless human scientists explored the stars. They felt that humans were too lonely in the vast universe, so they wanted to find aliens. However, on that day, the demonic insects arrived in a majestic and gloomy spaceship. The entire Earth fell into an unprecedented panic. When the demonic bugs were invading Earth, the Aragami that were tailing behind them had quietly descended upon Earth. With their parasitic characteristics, they had blended into the human population and quickly figured out the human society and civilization. It was just like the first time they invaded the demonic bug planet. The information was found by Lin Chongqing from the demonic insect's spaceship and the Aragami's spaceship. There were some incomplete spaceships of the Aragami and the demonic insect's spaceships all over the Earth. Dean still remembered the scene of the demonic insect's arrival. From the TV, he saw a huge spaceship emerging from the clouds and descending over the city like a mountain. The entire city fell into panic. No one knew that it was the doomsday of mankind. The enemies that mankind faced were not only the demonic insects, but also the terrifying Aragami that had infiltrated the human society. In front of these two races that could cross the stars, mankind was like a child. They could not withstand a single blow. Even the most powerful nuclear weapons couldn't change the outcome. The Earth still fell into the hands of the Aragami and the demonic insect. After the catastrophe, the Aragami and the demonic insects reached a balance. They found that the Earth was not only suitable for living, but the humans on the Earth were thermostatic creatures. According to the experiments of the demonic insects, the only feasible way to become a god was to combine the extreme powers of the ice and the flame insects. Then they would achieve a certain balance. Then they would be able to live forever. Thermostatic creatures like humans were an opportunity for the demonic insects. They tried to borrow the human body to find the balance between ice and fire. However, ice and fire were two extremes. The ordinary human body couldn't withstand it. So they tried to change the physique of humans. So they built a base on the Earth. That was the Federation, the Fire Dragon country. On the other side, the Aragami were aware of the intention of the demonic insects and built an imperial base. All three parties were doing their best to develop and research. They knew that if one of them was the first to create a god, then the other two parties were bound to be struck by lightning. They would either be destroyed or reduced to food. The law of the jungle was the only unchanging law of the universe. It wasn't only the humans who were experiencing the doomsday. The origami and the demonic insects were also suffering. Countless other animals on the earth were also in this doomsday. Where was the true face of the virus? Who would be able to stay out of trouble? It was estimated that the King of Darkness would end at the end of the month. Well, it might end on the 4th or 5th of the next month. It depended on the degree of diligence. Chapter 12:20. The so-called divine fetus is suitable for balancing the body of the ice and fire monster. It is also the purpose of the monster and the origami. That's why there is a monster research institute in the giant wall. On the surface, it seems that they are studying the effect of the monster and magic marks on the hunters, but in fact they are studying human beings. More than 200 years ago, Lin Chongqing was the only one who succeeded in the sage ice demonic insects experiment. However, he was lucky enough to deceive the sage ice demonic insect and hid his consciousness in the virtual world, while his body was taken away from Earth by the sage ice demonic insect. My body is also a divine fetus, but when I was born, the monster hadn't come to the Earth yet. Dean recalled the memory of his birth. There was some pain in his heart. Although he didn't want to remember and believe it, the scenes told him that he was created and not conceived by the mother. His birth came from the pursuit of longevity of life. He was a human's experiment, but he met the needs of the ice and fire monster and became a divine fetus. His creator, his father, froze him for personal reasons when the human race was about to be destroyed. He hoped that he could be the last spark of the human race and pass on the civilization. But in the world 300 years after his awakening, human beings still existed. They were spread all over the earth. It was not like what his father had imagined. Even without him, the inheritor, they were still living a good life. They were singing and dancing in the giant wall. On the contrary, he was struggling to survive in the human world after the catastrophe. So he woke up. The world didn't need him, it could still run. He wasn't the savior of the world. No one would care about such an inconspicuous person like him becoming the savior of the world. And he himself had long extinguished the idea of being a hero to save the world. The many experiences brought by the trajectory of life promoted the growth of people. From a naive and rebellious teenager to a sophisticated and docile middle-aged man. It was a kind of sadness, but no one could change it. It was like the law of the earth around the sun. It was irreversible, and he enjoyed it. Now that Lin Chongqing is dead, the Federation is a group of dragons without a leader. Let's recover the Federation first and then chase after the Demon Emperor. Let him prepare and catch him in one fell swoop. Dean thought of the current situation. The world that used to be hazy was now completely clear in his eyes. The three major forces divided the world into three parts. The monsters and the corpse kingdom were nothing to worry about. It was clear how to deal with and consider. This was because he was standing at a high position and could see far, but it also made him lose interest. Some things were painful to see too clearly. Before we reclaim the Federation, I'll separate my body first. Dean glanced at the origami girl. Through telepathy, he knew that they were in the same community, but it was not a pure symbiotic relationship. No one could leave the other. One had to know that when this desolate god girl was born, she came out from his body. Even without him, the desolate god girl could still live. However, he, who had spontaneously combusted, was definitely going to die. In order to preserve his life, the desolate god girl used her own body to nourish him. Because he did not have a heart, once he left the desolate god girl, he would quickly die. There were only two ways to break away from such a community relationship. The first way was to become a god. In this way, all the problems would be easily solved. But after reading Lin Chongqing's memory, Dean found that it was almost impossible for him to become a god. It was even more difficult than solving the problem of the walking corpse virus, because he did not have a heart. His body was incomplete and not qualified as a god's fetus. So the power of the ice-fire bug and the power of the desolate god could never reach a balance in his body. Even if he used the demonized organization to construct a heart, it would be meaningless. And his original heart had long been cut into pieces by Crimson Moon and thrown into experiments. Those experiments were abandoned in the giant wall of Sylvia, and some were in other giant walls. They had long rotted and turned into maggot feces. However, even if he couldn't find the original heart, there was another way, and that was to find a replacement heart. However, the replacement heart could not make him a god, but it could let him leave the desolate god girl and live alone. The stronger the replacement heart, the stronger the power he could use. And right now there was an excellent replacement heart, and that was the mechanical heart. From Lin Chongqing's memory, Dean knew the use of the mechanical heart. It was not only used on machines like the mainframe, but it could also be embedded in the body to replace the heart. However, to be able to use the mechanical heart, one must have a king-level body like him. If it was an ordinary person or even a powerhouse from the abyss, they would not be able to connect to the energy port of the mechanical heart, let alone withstand the terrifying energy of the mechanical heart. Previously, Lin Chongqing was able to use the body of the desolate god to fight with the desolate god girl, and it was also because of the energy of the mechanical heart. Before he was ready to embed the mechanical heart, Dean used telepathy to ask the desolate god girl, if he left her body, would she still treat him like this? But the answer he got was yes. This time Dean was relieved. From the fact that the latter broke out of the heart and took the initiative to protect him, it could be seen that it was not because of the community that made her so obedient. He first extracted his body from the body of the desolate god girl, and in the process, the latter also took the initiative to help him separate out the cells that belonged to him. It fell to the side of the snow like a lump of soft meat, and then the inside of the soft meat constructed a skeleton, internal organs, and other things. Slowly, it stood up and turned into a slender young man, which was Dean's original appearance. At this time, he had completely separated himself from the body of the origami girl. He instantly felt an unprecedented emptiness in his heart. It was even more desolate than this snowy world. He could not wait to stuff something into his heart to fill up this indescribably uncomfortable feeling. So he quickly grabbed the mechanical heart beside him, melted his palm, wrapped it around his hand, and pulled it into his chest where his heart was located. Then, he used his flesh and blood magic to create an interface and connected it to the mechanical heart. Instantly, 2 thumping sounds could be heard, causing his entire consciousness to buzz. The next moment, the strong beating became more and more clear, and the abnormal, uncomfortable feeling in his heart also disappeared, replaced by a vigorous energy that filled his whole body, as if the blood in his body was roaring, full of power. Is this the energy of the mechanical heart? No wonder it can drive the spaceship to jump between the stars. It's enough to let me squander my body at will, unlike before, when I used too much force and my heart couldn't bear it. Dean felt the vigorous power in his body, and tried to use his fingers to quickly transform into different tissues, such as cutting blades, magic claws, shields, and so on. Hundreds of kinds of abilities flashed at his fingertips, and the speed of the demonization was extremely fast, even faster than the previous full speed. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Mobile version website. Chapter 12:21. With the help of the mechanical heart, Dean felt that he could defeat the demon emperor by himself even without the help of the origami girl. After all, even if his body was incomplete, it was still a divine fetus. It was far stronger than the previous origami that Lin Chongqing controlled. Now that he had regained his freedom and extraordinary power, Dean didn't delay any longer. He immediately set off. The first step was to eat the Federation. The Federation was still in panic. Except for the first batch of refugees who hid in the underground shelters, the rest of the people were hiding in their homes or running to the temporary safe houses built by the military to seek shelter. The Federation had never suffered such a disaster before. The shelters that were prepared in the past couldn't accommodate the residents of the cities. The corpses of the soldiers of the Empire could be seen everywhere on the street. When Lin Chongqing gave the order to activate the nuclear bombs, the army of the Federation that had been obedient rebelled. Several military giants took the lead to resist and beat back the troops of the Imperium that were keeping an eye on them. They seized control of a few cities and then contacted the generals in other cities, preparing for a counterattack. There was no lack of wise people in the Empire's army. They quickly found out about the secret contact of the Federation military. A bloody battle of resistance and conquest began. In addition to fighting against the soldiers of the Empire, the Federation military also had to fight against some military leaders who had betrayed the Federation. These military leaders had the military secrets of the Federation. They would be promoted if they surrendered to the Empire. They cooperated with the soldiers of the Empire and exposed many of the strategic arrangements of the Federation military. This made the counterattack particularly difficult. Fortunately, the Terrace Consortium actively cooperated with the military. They invested a lot of mechanical armors and forcefully reversed the situation. The other three consortia didn't make much movement. They seemed to be waiting for something. Clearly, they were waiting for the outcome of the battle between the Demon Emperor and Lin Chongqing. This would affect their choices. After all, they weren't like Jasaloti, who was a loyal dog raised by Lin Chongqing. They didn't have a deep understanding of Lin Chongqing, so they couldn't place their entire financial group's fate on his trust. Killing, chaos, blood, and wailing. The entire Federation was in deep water. The destruction brought by the war was devastating. All the beautiful things were torn apart. Only the bloody fruits were left in the hands of the victors. Don't cry. Mom is here. Hi Yang, I'll be waiting for you at home. Be careful on your way here. The streets outside are full of demons. Don't let them see you. You bunch of beasts. You even dare to kill the elderly. Amen, amen, Almighty God, please protect us. In every corner of the Federation, the sounds of gunshots covered up the cries of children in the ruins. The rain of bullets pierced through the blue sky. Fighter jets roared and circled above the city. Smoke filled the air. Buildings were bombed, collapsed, or burned. Demons and troops could be seen everywhere on the streets, and there were even old scavengers curled up and shivering beside them. Dean flew out of Snow Mountain City. The railway connecting the cities had long been closed. Some of the air tracks were destroyed by bombs. He could only rely on himself to fly to the Federation capital. He wanted to use the equipment there to put an end to the war. Along the way, the scenes of disaster fell into his eyes. Even though he had experienced Sylvia's coup d'état and the subsequent series of vicious actions, he still felt a little sad when he saw this miserable world that was like purgatory on earth. Man fears suffering, but man often creates suffering for each other. On the battlefield, everyone was innocent, but no one was worthy of sympathy, because everyone was pitiful. Only the mastermind behind the scenes of the war, watching coldly from the sidelines, was the most cruel. Dean didn't expect that the Demon Emperor didn't order the withdrawal of the soldiers. Once he left, the remaining forces wouldn't be able to compete with Lin Chongqing. They would be sacrificed in vain. Unless the Demon Emperor thought that Lin Chongqing would be killed. He doesn't know of my existence, so he thinks that after killing Lin Chongqing, he will destroy everything. But he won't rule the Federation like a human. Dudian looked at the girl who was flying next to him. He was able to survive this time. Moreover, he had extraordinary strength because of her help. He was inferior to Lin Chongqing in terms of strategy. Dudian was defeated by Lin Chongqing. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. This time, luck was on his side. What should I call you in the future? Dean asked her. The origami girl looked at him in puzzlement. What should I call you? Dean suddenly understood that although she had learned the human language, she still didn't understand the rules of the human world. He thought for a moment and said, "You are not a human, so you don't need to have a human surname. After you were born, the first sound of your word was a, so use it as your surname. You don't have a gender, but since you have become a female, then use the wa next to the female character. You are the first god in the world and maybe the only one. God is your name. I will call you Wa from now on. How about it?" The origami girl didn't understand Dean's question. She clapped her hands. Okay. Dean was relieved to see that she did not reject the name. In fact, he named her with a purpose of testing her. Now it seemed that she really regarded him as a mother. Even if he told her that she was the first god in the world, she still did not change this idea. If it was a human, they might be proud or even have ambitions, but from her expression it seemed that she didn't know what ambition was. After a while, Dean and Goddess of Wa arrived at the capital of the Federation. He parachuted into the city and found that compared to the chaos in other cities, the war in the capital had already ended. He could see from the soldiers in uniform that the city had been captured by the Federation military. Dean and Wa came to the government building in the capital. They saw a large number of armors and tanks lined up on the spacious streets. The nearby streets were built to be extremely spacious because of the military parade. But at the moment they were fully armed. Dean used his X-ray vision to scan the depths of the building. He saw a large number of figures walking between the floors. Dean found a group of big shots wearing general badges. They gathered in a well-defended office for a meeting. There was a projection of the war situation in other cities. Dean also saw a familiar face among these big shots. It was the chairman of the Terrace Consortium, Jacelity. Chapter 12:22. The demons have been accumulating troops in the Middle East region. Are they planning to retreat? Now that the capital has been seized by us, I heard that the demon lord has been defeated. Without a leader, they should naturally retreat. Even if they don't retreat, gathering in that barren land in the Middle East region is just digging their own grave. I don't think so. The terrain in the Middle East region is flat and not good for defense. If they want to retreat, they shouldn't choose to gather here. Aren't they afraid that we will wipe them all out? I feel that with the demons' brutal and bloodthirsty nature, retreat is fake. They most likely want to use this place as a springboard to directly attack the capital. Directly attack the capital? General Nye must be joking. The Middle East region is separated by 2 large rivers, countless ferocious beasts in the rivers, and separated by 8 mountains. The railway tracks are completely sealed. How long would it take to march to the capital from outside the city? By the time they make it halfway, our missiles would have already bombarded them. As far as I know, there is a secret canyon that can directly lead to the capital. However, the canyon's environment is harsh and is occupied by steel snake. These steel snake are venomous creatures to us, but they can't withstand a single blow from the demons. If they advance through the canyon's secret canyon, they can greatly shorten the distance to the capital. Then, they can make a detour from the canyon to Meifeng mountain range and attack the southwest arsenal of the capital. It will be a huge blow to us. In the conference room, when everyone heard General Nye's words, their disapproving expressions turned solemn and their pupils constricted. If it was really as General Nye said, once the demons succeeded, the consequences would be unimaginable. Someone immediately suggested to inspect the canyon's secret canyon. Soon, the map projection on the table was enlarged, and a long curved canyon with a large number of red heat sources could be seen. One had to know that this canyon was full of steel snake. There were few people here, so how could there be heat sources? General Nye's words immediately came true, and everyone's expression changed. These demons are despicable. The demon lord has already retreated, yet they still want to attack our Federation and look down on us. Outrageous! We will set a trap in the canyon and bury them while their army is advancing. Everyone was furious and decided to attack the demons. At this time, someone asked the quiet Jasaloti, "Chairman, you said that the demon lord has retreated and was defeated by the god of science and technology. Is that true?" As soon as this was said, everyone's eyes fell on Jasaloti. "Of course it's real." Jasaloti came back to his senses and saw a hint of suspicion in everyone's eyes. He snorted coldly, "Do you think I will lie to you? Do you think that the Sir God of Science and Technology is no match for a mere demon overlord? Don't forget who helped you take back the armory in the capital." When everyone heard this, they retracted their gazes. The person who had asked earlier hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, "Chairman, you're being too serious. Of course, we won't doubt the great god of science and technology. Since the demon emperor has left, and his army is still determined to attack the Federation, why don't you ask the other 3 consortiums to attack together and cooperate with us to completely destroy these damn demons?" Jasaloti snorted coldly. Just as he was about to speak, the wall of the conference room suddenly exploded with a bang. Dust flew everywhere, and steel bars protruded out of the wall. The steel plate embedded in the middle was also pierced. The steel plate was electrified, and at this moment, sparks were flashing from the hole. A slender and cold figure stood in the dust, stepping on the crushed stones on the ground and stepping into the conference room. "Who are you?" "Men, guard!" "Attack of the demon clan? How is it possible?" "Guards!" The generals and the senior leaders of the Terrace Financial Group in the meeting room were all shocked. Their expressions changed drastically as they looked at the figures that had broken through the wall. This was their headquarters, and there were countless guards, mechas, and war chariots outside. However, the enemy had charged right in front of them. At this moment, they were no different from naked lambs. They were, after all, just ordinary people in front of the demon race. "Noisy!" A cold snort sounded, and the dust was sucked away by the wind outside, revealing Dean's figure. His cold eyes looked at the people in the conference room, and there seemed to be cold electricity flashing in his eyes. Through genetic enhancement, his spiritual force covered the whole conference room. A cold snort interrupted all the exclamations, and shocked everyone's mind, making them feel dizzy. "It's you!" Jasaloti was shocked when he saw Dean's face. He jumped out of his chair and cried out in alarm. At this time, the sound of mechanical armors echoed from outside. The sound of uniform footsteps came from outside. It was the guards who had followed Dean. Generals and consortium directors were relieved as they heard the sound of the guards. Someone saw Jasaloti's abnormal behavior and immediately asked, "Chairman, do you know this person?" Jasaloti's eyes were wide open as he stared at Dean. Dean glanced at him. "Don't think about it. Your so-called god of science and technology has been destroyed by me. From now on, I will be the leader of the Federation. Anyone who disagrees will die. Anyone who resists will die." "Nonsense. Which king of the demon race are you? Tell me your name." A burly general shouted in anger. Although he seemed angry, but his words were calculated. The first purpose was to understand Dean's identity. After all, the Federation was the old enemy of the Empire. The spies of the Federation had been collecting information about the abilities of the kings of the Empire. If they knew who Dean was, they would naturally know his abilities. They could find a way to defeat him. The second purpose was to stall for time. He believed that Dean wouldn't kill everyone outside. After all, if something happened, the outside would be the first to inform them. Therefore, he judged that Dean had used some means to force his way in. He wanted to capture all the leaders so that the Federation would be without a leader. Therefore, the best choice was to stall for time and wait for rescue. "Noisy!" Dean's face was indifferent as he raised his hand. A ray of light shot out from his fingertips and pierced through the general's forehead. The general's body stiffened and his consciousness disappeared. It seemed that he didn't expect that Dean wouldn't play cards according to the rules. The other generals were shocked and angry as they saw Dudian raise his hand to kill. They clenched their fists, but they didn't dare to provoke Dudian again. "Who else has any questions?" Dean looked at the crowd. Everyone's face turned ugly. No one made a sound as they waited for their subordinates to come to rescue them. Not long after, a calm and magnetic voice sounded out, "Demon Clan inside, listen up, please leave quickly, our missiles have already locked onto this place, there are 10 Chuangshi God mecha armor outside, on standby at any time, if you leave now, we will let you go, if you dare to hurt anyone, we will tear your corpse into 10,000 pieces." Chapter 12:23. Everyone was relieved when they heard this. The army outside was safe and sound. "Demon Clan, did you hear that? We have 10 Creation God mecha guarding us, and every single Creation God mecha can contend against your Demon Clan king. Although I don't know what method you used to sneak in, now that you've been exposed to our satellite surveillance, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. I advise you to leave quickly. Even if you kidnap us or even kill us, there will still be a new general to preside over the overall situation and annihilate your demon race." A middle-aged man with a square face full of righteousness shouted, "Yes, if you kill one of us, there will be thousands of us. The Federation will never surrender." The others saw that Dean didn't respond, so they responded loudly. Some of them were hot-blooded while others were trying to save themselves. At the same time, Jasaloti, who was in the crowd, quickly took out his personal communicator. It was a star-shaped accessory that looked like a wheel handle. It was the communicator he used to contact Lin Chongsheng. He activated the communicator and it flashed red. "Can't connect?" Jacketti's pupils shrank. He was shocked. This communicator could contact Lin Chongsheng at any time. Lin Chongsheng lived in the virtual world and didn't have the concept of hibernation. Even if he was in hibernation or busy with other things, he could still sense Jacketti's communicator or use his clone to take over the communicator. There had never been a situation where the connection couldn't be reached. His heart shook as he thought of Dean's words. Was it true? Was Lin Chongsheng really dead? As the chairman of the Terrace Financial Group and the only person who had come into direct contact with Lin Chongsheng, he knew better than anyone in the Federation how unfathomable Lin Chongsheng was, how intelligent he was, and how cunning and vicious he was. Such a person had countless mechanical armies in his hands. He could control the Federation's missile launch at any time. The entire military power of the Federation was equivalent to Lin Chongsheng's hands and feet. He was almost an invincible god. He couldn't think of any way to kill him. He was a god. "Noisy," Dean said indifferently. "I'll give you one more chance to choose. Live or die." Dean indifferently glanced at everyone. When everyone saw his eyes, their blood and anger quickly cooled down. It was as if ice water had been poured into them. They felt cold from head to toe. Dean slowly raised his hand. The next moment, his 5 fingers suddenly burst out and turned into a black blade that was tens of meters long. The entire roof of the conference room was cut open and crushed. In less than a tenth of a second, all the powder was shaken out. The conference room was located at the bottom of the most solid building in the government building. It was more than a dozen floors high. At this moment, all the dust dissipated and revealed the blue sky. The sunlight shone down, shining on everyone's bodies. Everyone was stunned and raised their heads to look. It was as if they were peeking at the most beautiful ray of light from the depths of hell, feeling incomparably dazzling. With a wave of his hand, a 3S-level security building was turned into ashes. However, Dean's action didn't stop there. The demonic blades extended from his 5 fingers and extended for tens of meters. Like 5 thick chains, they suddenly penetrated the chests of 5 towering mechas that were more than 10 meters tall. That was the cockpit of the mechas. The mecha operators inside were killed on the spot. The strong composite B-shaped shell could withstand the bombardment of countless rockets, but at this moment it was easily penetrated like a piece of paper. When the 5 black chains retracted, the pulling force pulled the 5 Genesis God mechas, and they crashed to the ground. The tremors made people's hearts jump. Many generals and consortium directors were stunned. They couldn't believe the horrible scene in front of them. Without the obstruction of the wall, the many guards surrounding the conference room were all exposed. It was as if they had been stripped naked in a world of ice and snow, and there was no way for them to hide. All of the guards were dumbfounded, especially when they saw the 5 Genesis God mechas collapse. They felt as if the entire world had collapsed. These were the most powerful mechas in the Federation. Their ingrained image of power collapsed in an instant. The scene was deathly silent, and it continued for over 10 breaths of time until someone's legs went weak and fell to the ground. Only then did the others wake up as if from a nightmare, and they noticed that their entire bodies were drenched in cold sweat that drenched their clothes. No, it's impossible. Lodi was the calmest. However, he couldn't help but scream in his heart when he saw the horrifying scene. At this moment, he was completely convinced of Dean's words. If Lin Chongqing wasn't killed, it was impossible for an existence like Dean to appear here without any warning. The reason why he participated in the military meeting and didn't take advantage of the chaos to seize power was that he knew that Lin Chongqing was still alive. As long as Lin Chongqing was alive, even if the entire Federation collapsed, he could still make a comeback. On the contrary, if Lin Chongqing was dead, then the entire Federation would be torn apart even if there wasn't a civil strife caused by the invasion of the demons. Is it difficult to make a choice? Dean looked at the silent crowd and said indifferently. There was a trace of killing intent in his voice. It seemed that he had lost his patience. I'm willing to be loyal to you. A panicked voice came from the crowd. It was a fat man in a suit. His legs were trembling. From his appearance, it could be seen that he was a director of the consortium. People of any class had a tendency to follow the crowd. When someone took the lead, there would be others who would follow. The other directors immediately expressed their positions. Many generals' faces changed as they looked at Lodi. Lodi's expression changed for a moment. Under Dean's indifferent gaze, he finally gritted his teeth and said, "I have no objection." Many generals' faces turned ashen. After losing the support of the Terrace Consortium, their military strength would be reduced by nearly half. After all, only 2 of the 10 creators' mecha were in service. One of them had been destroyed by Dean. Dean's expression was emotionless. He didn't feel happy because of the surrender of the Terrace Consortium. It seemed that he didn't feel anything. After waiting for no one to speak, he slowly said, "It seems that the rest of you are unwilling to surrender. In that case, you can all go to hell." As he spoke, a sharp blade protruded from the back of his hand and shot out like a chain. It pierced through the head of the nearest general. Brain juice burst out and he died on the spot. "General Yu!" someone exclaimed. Don't kill me. I'll surrender, I'll surrender. Don't kill me. I'll surrender." The rest of the generals who reacted quickly raised their hands to surrender. Some of them held their heads and squatted down. They were afraid of being hit by the terrifying blade chain. This scene was more embarrassing than the previous time when the consortium directors had surrendered. The guards who surrounded the area looked at each other. They knew that the matter was doomed and couldn't be changed. The sharp blade chain protruded from the back of Dean's hand, swam through the crowd like a viper. It swept past the heads of the generals who had stubborn faces. Their heads fell to the ground one by one. Those who insisted on justice would die. Those who were timid and greedy for life would live. Chapter 12:24. Under Du Dian's violent suppression, Many senior military officials had to surrender. As for how many of them were sincere and how many of them were hypocritical, there was no need to explore. Tell me about the current situation of the Federation. Has the war with the demons subsided? Dean sat on the chief chair above the conference room. His fingers gently tapped on the table. The previously closed conference room had completely turned into an open-air camp. Outside the conference room, there were 3 layers of guards, mechas, mechanical guards and so on. They surrounded the conference room and saluted. The generals looked at each other in dismay. Under the watchful eyes of their subordinates, they felt uncomfortable all over and didn't know whether to stand or sit. Mr. Dean, should we change the place to discuss about the demon race? After all, it's related to the war situation of the entire Federation. In case there are demon spies. Jaislady bit the bullet and said to Dean. However, he wasn't able to finish his words as he was interrupted. No need. Dean waved his hand and indifferently looked at him. I have to correct you. I have just said that the Federation will be under my control from now on. This is to tell you that the Federation system has ended and will be replaced by an Empire system. There is only one voice here and that is me. My status is equivalent to the Emperor of an ancient dynasty. By calling me Mr. Du, you are looking down on my authority. Since this is your first offense, I will let you off this time. If anyone else makes such a stupid mistake in the future, I will not be able to see their heads anymore. Everyone's eyes shrank as they heard Dean's words. They secretly shouted dictatorship in their hearts. But they didn't dare to speak out. Especially those who had their vital interests deprived. They clenched their fists and buried their heads so that Dean wouldn't see the hatred and anger in their eyes. I know I was wrong. Emperor Dean. Jaislady looked at Dean's emotionless eyes. He quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. He sighed in his heart. Wasn't the Federation a dictatorship in the past? But the dictator was Lin Chongqing, who was hiding in the dark. But now it was Dean. It was a naked and undisguised dictatorship. His situation didn't change much for Jaislady. But for the other generals who occupied a big city like the ancient princes, it was a huge loss. Continue to talk about the situation of the demons. Dean snorted and leaned on the back of the chair. He glanced at the people standing on both sides of the conference table. Many generals and consortium directors didn't dare to take their seat. They were afraid that their every move would anger Dean. The floor at their feet was still flowing with the blood of other rebels. People could feel the bloody, murderous aura in the air all the time. Yes, Emperor. Jaislady felt bitter in his heart, but he politely nodded and greeted them. Then, he threw this thorny problem to the military beside him and said, Generals, you are the most familiar with this matter. Tell them. The faces of several generals changed. One of them, who had a black wolf tattoo on his arm, braced himself and said, Great Emperor, these demons are resisting stubbornly. They are gathering in the Middle East. We don't know for the time being whether they plan to evacuate or attack our capital. Middle East? Dean's eyes lit up. Do you have a map? Yes, but the equipment here has been. The general wanted to say that the equipment had been destroyed by Dudian, but he thought of the previous killings. He was afraid to anger Dudian, so he changed his words. The equipment here is old. It is better to move to the frontline command. There is the most advanced equipment there. There is a holographic map, and the battlefield information is clear at a glance. Dean didn't answer but asked, Can we send news to the cities? The general was puzzled. Emperor, are you going to release the news? We have a variety of channels to release news, and every city has established a disaster communication network that can transmit voice messages. If the equipment in some cities is in good condition and the signal towers are not destroyed, they can also watch our live broadcast on television. That's good. Dean nodded. Let's go to the headquarters. Arrange for the news to be broadcast there. I want to announce a few things to the country. I want to quell the demons. Everyone's face changed. They faintly guessed what Dean was going to announce. Once the news was broadcasted, it meant that Dean's identity would be solidified. He would become the #1 person in the Federation. Fine, let's just let it be. If we assassinate him in the future, we can still cripple him. Many generals thought to themselves. Goddess Wa followed Dean like his shadow. Others were amazed by the unparalleled beauty of the girl, but they didn't have much other feelings. They knew that demons could change their bodies, including their appearance, because they had been in contact with the demons for a long time. They knew that the demons could change their bodies, including their appearance, so it wasn't worth being amazed by her beauty. After a moment, Dean led the generals and the directors of the consortium to the headquarters. The place was well equipped. The generals naturally knew about the situation in the conference room of the building next to them. Dean's strength was obvious to all. He had destroyed 5 creators' mecha and defeated their strongest individual combat force. This meant that unless they detonated the nuclear weapons and launched all the nuclear bombs stored in the capital at the same time, they could only obediently listen to Dean's word. There was no room for resistance. The 2 commanders came in and ordered the commanders to salute to Dean. It wasn't to flatter Dean but to protect the commanders. They were worried that they would collide with Dean and be killed by him. The generals in the headquarters could only silently accept the fact in front of the commanders, generals and other outstanding generals. They couldn't change it for the time being. Very soon, the command center brought up a holographic map of the Federation, which appeared above the desk in the center of the command center. There was a miniature of the 100 cities of the Federation on the map, and almost every city had some red dots. These red dots represented the demons, except for the capital. Only the blue city frame was very clean, indicating that the demons here had been completely wiped out. Even if there were any survivors, they might have hidden themselves, not being detected by the detectors and surveillance cameras. At this time, the live broadcast channel was set up in the headquarters. Everyone's eyes were focused on Dean's body. From the commander to the second lieutenant level information technician, and even the invited reporters of the Federal Official News Agency were silently watching the youth. His handsome appearance didn't look like a devil's executioner's hands were stained with blood. Instead, he looked like a brilliant TV star. But the invisible majesty exuded from the young man's body. It was unintentional, but it made people feel an inexplicable sense of fear. The entire headquarters was silent. No one dared to make any sound for fear of alarming something. Dean asked the commander next to him to bring him a pen and paper. He quickly wrote a press release and handed it to the reporters. This was the opening of the news. The purpose was naturally to attract the attention of the residents of the Federation who were in deep trouble at the moment. The press release solemnly told them that God had descended and would immediately come to save them. What could be more exciting than this moment when everyone was in a state of panic and unease? The reporter who received the press release quickly glanced at it. Soon he was shocked by the content of the press release. He couldn't help but look up at Dean. This person actually claimed to be a god? The shock lasted for a short time. The beautiful presenter who graduated from a top university and was responsible for reading the press release felt the cold atmosphere in the air. She didn't dare to question or ask any questions. No matter how unbelievable the content was, she decided to broadcast it. When the live news started, she immediately adjusted her expression and posture and recited the press release that she had previously quickly recited. At the same time, the communication stations all over the Federation, old radios, video websites on wristwatches, and even TV sets that were popular with the elderly, were broadcasting or reprinting the latest government news from the Federation capital at the same time. In this period of disaster, countless people were looking forward to the movement of the government. Therefore, when the news was broadcasted, countless people saw the news. Some cities were under the attack of the demon race. The TV signal and network equipment were destroyed, but they still had radios. For the education of the Federation, most ordinary people could dismantle their TV sets or wristwatches and transform them into radios. The radio was an antique, but it still existed. In the minds of some warriors who went out to hunt, the radio was better than the wristwatch because the wristwatch couldn't connect to the network in the wasteland. However, the radio could listen to the sounds from the Federation cities. The demon race has disturbed the order of the world. The great God has come to punish the evil demon race. The God has said that the demon race will completely disappear from the Federation in one day. Everyone in the disaster, I empathize with you. Please hold on. Your prayers have come true. The God has really come, the beautiful host said excitedly in front of the camera. Her voice was high-pitched, and she displayed an extremely professional standard. However, in her heart, she didn't believe a single word that came out of her mouth. If there was a God, then why would God allow the existence of the demon race in the world? However, people in despair wouldn't think about these things intellectually and rationally like her. Even for a small number of rational people, even if they were in despair, they would feel that these words were very unscientific. However, the legend of God had been circulating in the Federation. After all, the demon race existed. Shouldn't there be a God? This wasn't the materialistic society of the old era. Although the Federation's technology was ahead of the old era, but in such a world environment, most people always believed that there was a God in the world. Dean had absorbed the memory of Lin Chongqing. He had a deep understanding of the thinking of the Federation's civilians. The most important thing was that no matter whether others believed it or not, he would use facts to prove it. After all, seeing is believing. Many generals silently listened to the passionate performance of the beautiful host. Their eyes fell on Dean. They felt strange and sad at the same time. A demon race had run in front of them and declared that he was a god. However, they couldn't refute it. Very quickly, the beautiful MC finished her press release, and the camera switched to the command center. Many generals and directors of the Terrace Financial Group were gathered there, including the famous Cecil Lodi in the Federation. It was a dazzling scene, and anyone who saw it would feel excited and excited. This meant that the Federation had not fallen, and they were still fighting against the demon race. Two extraordinary faces stood in the middle of the crowd. Dean's cheeks had become more and more handsome after he had evolved into the Abyss Walker. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the appearance of the snail god was a calamity that could cause the downfall of a city. Her beauty was impeccable. The two of them stood together like gods. The ordinary, rough, and ugly faces of the other generals were covered. It was a strong contrast. Is this God? What a beautiful girl. What a handsome guy. Is there really a God? How is it possible? Is it fake? Countless people who saw the scene through the live broadcast were surprised. Some people who were in a relatively safe environment had fallen into the illusion of Dean and Goddess of Wa. Are these the cities that were invaded by the demon race? Dean pointed at the holographic projection and asked the commander next to him. The commander was at a loss. Didn't I tell you before? Why are you asking again? Soon, he thought of the live broadcast. Dean was deliberately putting on a show. As for the purpose, he couldn't guess it. But most likely it was to confuse the world. Yes, the red dots on these cities are the invading demon race. The commander was very cooperative. He was trying to figure out Dean's intention. As for tearing off Dean's mask in front of the live broadcast, he wouldn't do it. Godwa, do you remember all of these cities? Especially the Middle East region. Most of the demons are gathered there. Go and destroy them. Dean turned to look at the snail god. His voice naturally spread out from the live broadcast. Goddess of Wa? Countless people were excited and curious. Some of them had a skeptical attitude. Yes. Goddess of Wa nodded obediently. Are you waiting for me here? Yes, I'll wait for you here. Come back quickly. Dean smiled. Then I'll go. Goddess Wa grinned. Her perfect face once again stunned everyone. Even the generals who knew the truth couldn't help but take a few more glances at her, feeling a surge of heat in their hearts. Dean sent a telepathic message to her. Goddess of Wa understood and smiled. She seemed to find it very interesting. Her body exuded silver hazy light. A pair of snow-white and beautiful wings stretched out from her back. It wasn't as ferocious and brutal as the wings she used in the previous battle. She was like a fairy in the moon, a fairy that existed in myth. She had a beautiful face, beautiful white wings, and her whole body was covered in a hazy divine light. Her body slowly floated up, and with a whoosh, she disappeared through the dome wall of the command center. However, the dome was not damaged at all, and the camera outside the command center immediately switched, capturing her back as she shuttled out of the building and soared into the sky. If she wasn't a goddess, then what was she? All the people who saw the scene were shocked. What followed was incomparable excitement and excitement. Some people even had tears streaming down their cheek. Someone had finally come to save them. No, it was God. God, you are finally willing to care for us. At this moment, many cities that were under the attack of the demon race cheered. Their prayers had come true. They didn't need to hide under the dark bed and shiver. God would come to save them. Some people looked out of the window, hoping to see the beautiful figure flying over the sky. In the cities that had not been invaded by the demon tribe, countless people saw this scene. Some of them were incredibly excited, while others maintained their rationality. They were skeptical, but most of them believed it. After all, this miraculous scene was real. Secondly, there were a group of generals wearing countless shining medals guarding the scene. There were also many directors of the Terrace Financial Group, as well as a legendary figure like Jacelity. None of these people refuted it. It was clear that they had admitted it. In front of so many authoritative figures, how could a fake trick be hidden from them? So most of it was true. Please remember this book's domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 12:25. In front of the live news, Dean was surrounded by many generals and consortium directors. He looked up at the holographic image suspended in the air. The surveillance of the Federation couldn't detect Goddess Wa, but he could speculate her approximate position in his mind from the speed at which she left. Emperor, do we need to do anything? A major general saw that everyone was silent, so he couldn't help but ask Dean. In his mind, even if they were held hostage by Dean, but if they could use Dean to repel the demons, then they wouldn't be humiliated here in vain. No need. Dudian indifferently said. She alone is enough to deal with a low-level demon. You will watch from here. In less than an hour the Middle East will become a forbidden area for the demons. As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked, including the audience watching the live broadcast of the news. They were all dumbfounded. One person could wipe out the demons in the Middle East in 1 hour? It should be known that this was a large area, not just a city. There were countless devils gathered in it. Let alone an hour, even if the federal army attacked for 10 days or half a month, they might not be able to capture this area. Dean didn't explain much. Goddess Wa was the first god of the earth. The demons in the Middle East didn't even have a king. The highest commander in the Middle East was the Lord of the Abyss. They were like babies in front of Goddess Wa. When he said 1 hour, he was giving Goddess Wa some leeway. He was worried that she would waste time because of her lust for fun. In fact, if it were him, it would not even take him half an hour to take the head of the enemy general and defeat the demons immediately. Hundreds of thousands of demons are gathered in the Middle East. They are disturbing the world and killing innocent people. Won't the civilians suffer if they can't be wiped out within an hour? Dean said again. The generals were dumbfounded. What Dean said was right, but he had to be able to do it. Some meticulous people heard the overtones of the word. It seemed that Dean was accusing the demons of killing and showing benevolence. But in fact he was talking about the hundreds of thousands of troops of the demons. Once the girl defeated the demons, then a more powerful image would be erected on her body. This image, combined with Dean's previous words, would undoubtedly make the masses believe that they were gods. If it wasn't a god who could repel hundreds of thousands of demons alone? Even they couldn't deny this point. They knew that even the king of the demons couldn't do it. However, if it was really the demon king, there was another way to force the demon king to retreat in less than an hour, and that was to issue an order. Wasn't it the same for the people to retreat in the name of the king of the demons? Cold sweat broke out as they thought of this. Was this a conspiracy of the demons? If they really succeeded, wouldn't they be able to take away the ruling power of the Federation without losing a single soldier? The more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. The originally slightly shocked and silent atmosphere suddenly rippled with uneasiness. Standing in the center of the crowd, Dean vaguely felt a trace of abnormality. His expression did not change, but he used his peripheral vision to capture the expressions and eyes of everyone around him. Suddenly he saw a clue. After a little thought, he guessed the problem. Before he could open his mouth to break everyone's conjecture, he suddenly felt the muscles of one of the generals tighten, and his body reacted abnormally, as if he was preparing to do something. The next moment, he saw the general clench his fists and stare at him angrily, shouting, "Evil demon, don't think that your evil plan will succeed. You are a demon, not some *T-god, don't think that you can." Before he could say the word hostage, his voice suddenly stopped. Dean reacted and took action as soon as the general said the first word. Although the speed of the general wasn't slow, but in his eyes the actions of the ordinary people were like the speed of a turtle. Courting death. Dean raised his hand, and the light refracted from the crystal particles in his palm turned golden, like a divine light, which enveloped the man and forced the words out of his mouth into his throat. He felt a gust of wind from his mouth, unable to breathe, and his tongue was oppressed to the point that he couldn't move. The other generals couldn't help but change their expressions. They were ready to take action, but at this moment the general, who was shrouded in golden light, suddenly roared like a beast. The sound didn't sound like a human but like the roar of a monster. The generals who were ready to defend were shocked. They looked back in horror. Puff! A bloody tentacle broke through the golden light and slapped towards Dean. Dean picked up the notebook on the table, tore a page from it and threw it. The paper was covered with a layer of golden light. Puff! The blood tentacles were cut off. The next moment everyone saw the true face of the general. He was covered with strange tentacles and a ferocious mouth. He was like a monster mixed with countless visceral tissues. No one knew where his body came from as he rushed towards Dean. Purification! Dean shouted and raised his hand. His palm was shrouded in golden light as he slapped towards the general's head. His palm instantly became bigger and turned into a giant palm. Bang! The general was smashed into the ground of the headquarters. The ground shook and a huge pit was formed. The general's body had turned into blood and exuded a fishy smell. Fortunately, the building was earthquake-proof. Although the walls were shaking, but there were no signs of cracks. Everyone in the headquarters was completely sluggish when Dean retracted his palm. They couldn't believe what they saw. Demon? The demon had sneaked into their side and had a meeting with them? This sudden turn of events not only stunned everyone present, but it also stunned the audience watching the live broadcast. But soon everyone's eyes were brimming with tears of excitement. Slapping a demon to death with a raise of his hand, his handsome face, his invincible strength, all of which displayed the demeanor of a god. After a brief silence, Dudian indifferently said, "I didn't notice that a demon had sneaked in here." Fortunately, he was reckless and exposed his identity. Everyone was shocked as they looked at the blood pit on the ground. They couldn't speak for a long time. Jasaloti was as shocked as everyone else, but soon he felt that something was wrong. If the general was a demon, then why would he jump out and accuse Dean? He absolutely didn't believe in God because Dean was captured and imprisoned like a dog by Lin Chongqing. He didn't have the ability to resist. Is it a double act? No, he can kill Lin Chongqing. He doesn't need to use such a clumsy method. Jasaloti frowned. He felt that this man couldn't be provoked. The other generals woke up from the initial shock. Some of them were aware of the abnormality of this matter. They were more vigilant against Dean and didn't dare to accuse him. After all, although they were suspicious, but they haven't seen how Dean turned an ordinary person into a demon. Acting rashly would only put them in the same dangerous situation. Dean faintly glanced at everyone. There was a hint of warning in his eyes. The method to turn the general into a demon was very simple for him. He only needed to inject part of his tissues into the ground through the soles of his feet. Then he would drill into the body from the soles of other people's feet. Then he would destroy the brain and take over the body. On the surface it seemed as if the demon had exposed his true body. This was the reason why he wasn't afraid of the live broadcast. Even if someone jumped out to accuse him, he could suppress them. Moreover, it would become a stepping stone for his image. Demons are pervasive. After this incident is over, we will give everyone a collective inspection in case there are other demons mixed in. Dean indifferently said. Everyone heard the warning in his words. They felt that this man was 100 times more terrifying than a demon. Chapter 12:26. Dean estimated that God of Wa was about to arrive in the Middle East. Can you get the details of the cities in the Middle East? The two commanders and many generals couldn't help but look at the lieutenant general who was in charge of the battlefield information. The lieutenant general had never felt that the eyes of an outsider could be so sharp. He had a feeling of cold sweat. If he agreed, then it was tantamount to following Dean. If the federal government regained control in the future, then he would naturally be held responsible for this matter. If he denied, then he would offend Dean. The lieutenant general hesitated between his future and his life. He chose Dean's side. It can be transferred. Emperor, please take a look. He waved his hand to instruct the technicians to transfer the holographic images of the Middle East. The map of the Federation that was suspended on the table was converted into a partial map. Dean glanced at it. Can you pull up the surveillance video of each city? Yes. The lieutenant general replied. Very soon, a few square screens appeared on one side of the table. Sounds of explosions and cries could be heard, but as soon as they started, they stopped abruptly. A technician had muted the screen. Dean said in a calm tone, "Turn on the sound." The technician was afraid to disturb Dudian, but at the moment he heard the displeasure in Dudian's words. Cold sweat dripped down his back. He quickly turned on the sound and made it louder. On the screen, the sky was filled with smoke and buildings were being bombed and collapsed. Noisy wails and the sound of gunfire mixed together. Every time a building collapsed, people could be seen fleeing from the bottom of the building like rats. Those who escaped slower were crushed by the collapsed rubble and buried alive on the spot. Every screen was a purgatory on earth. A large number of demons were gathered in the cities of the Middle East. They were in the most tragic areas of the war. The residents of the cities were either captured or slaughtered. Even the dignitaries who were hiding in the underground shelters were pulled out and slaughtered like cattle and sheep. There were corpses everywhere on the street. There were old people and children. Gynecological hospitals couldn't escape from the artillery shells. Many generals in the conference room couldn't help but change their expressions when they saw such a tragic scene. As for the people watching the live broadcast of the news, all of them had tears streaming down their cheeks. Some of them felt their blood flow in the opposite direction, and their hearts were filled with hot blood. They wished they could go to the battlefield themselves, but they calmed down under the tugs of their families. Some of the people in the disaster areas saw these scenes and felt the same, crying bitterly. As for the residents in the less affected cities, they saw the scene of their compatriots being slaughtered and died tragically, and they were all shocked and angry. Only some naive boys and girls were immersed in their own games, animations, shopping, and entertainment. They didn't care about the disturbances of the outside world unless the internet was disconnected. These demons deserve to die 10,000 times for their sins. Dean looked at the tragic scene on the screen. His body was covered in hazy golden light as if he was really angry. Many generals and consortium directors were still immersed in the front-line battlefield. They were startled as they saw Dean's angry face. They didn't expect him to be angry because of the innocent civilians. However, they immediately sobered up when they saw the hazy golden light around Dean's body. They were ashamed of their naivety. "Today, I'm going to expel and annihilate all the demons," Dean said solemnly as he looked at the live broadcast. Everyone was surprised. A general next to him couldn't help but ask, "Eliminate all the demons in one day?" "Yes, one day." Dean's eyes were cold. "Before the sun sets, all the demons in the Federation will be annihilated." Everyone looked at each other. They knew that Dean was acting. However, if he said this in front of the news, then wouldn't it be a slap in the face if the media in the cities exposed that there was a demon ransacking? Or was he really sure that he could order all the demons to retreat in one day? Suddenly, there was a burst of exclamation. The exclamation was so loud that everyone could not help but look in the direction of the sound, only to find that the sound came from the screen. A beam of divine light flew across the sky, and then they saw a beautiful figure like a goddess descending. Beautiful wings on her back and a perfect face. Wasn't it Goddess Wa who had just left not long ago? Everyone was shocked. It was a long way from the capital to the Middle East. Even the fastest fighter would take half an hour. But how long did it take? Less than 10 minutes. The next moment, everyone saw Goddess Wa shuttling through the city like a silver light. Countless demons were killed on the streets. She raised her hand and shot out countless silver lights. They were like needles that pierced into the ground. Every demon that was pierced by the silver light died. This scene appeared on the monitor screen and also appeared in the eyes of the people who were watching the live broadcast. The entire Federation was boiling. Even though they were in despair and danger, everyone was excited and howling. God had really come. God said that she would save them, and she really appeared on the battlefield to save them. Everyone in the command center was also stunned by Goddess Wa's strength on the screen. It was a bloody massacre. At this speed, not to mention 1 hour, she could kill all the demons in the Middle East in half an hour. Dean was surprised. He didn't expect that the monitor could capture Goddess Wa's figure. But since it had been captured, there was no need to continue the recording. In case she showed some cruel means and made people think of the demons, then it wouldn't be good. Turn off the screen and look at the situation of the demons in the Middle East, Dean ordered. The screen was quickly turned off. The people in front of the live broadcast wanted to see more. At this time, everyone saw that the red dots in a city in the Middle East were rapidly disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The originally densely packed red dots covered the entire city, but at this moment, like an eraser, they were forcibly erased, revealing the original blue outline of the pattern. "It's Blizzard City. She's killing the demons there. Hurry up. Contact the military and tell them to stand by and defend. Also send the previous video and tell them to do everything possible to cooperate with her." The generals knew that Goddess Wa wasn't acting. Dean was really going to kill the demons. It was a rare opportunity, so they immediately seized it to cooperate with Dean. At the same time, in the temporary headquarters built by the Empire in the Middle East, the changes in Blizzard City alarmed the Empire's upper echelons. They immediately held a meeting. Several generals of the Federation who had surrendered to the Empire got the news from their subordinates. They immediately connected to the network and saw the live broadcast of the Federation. Their faces changed dramatically. They immediately found the highest commanders of the Empire and the Lords of the Pit. After telling them about the live broadcast, the Lords of the Deep Caves immediately asked him to play the live broadcast. The upper echelons of the empire saw the situation in the capital. They also saw Dean, who was surrounded by many generals. They also saw the video of Goddess while slaughtering the soldiers of Blizzard City. Expel us in one day? Ridiculous. I'd like to see what will happen if she can't do it. Have you analyzed the woman's combat strength? A few moments later, the Empire's technician used the latest technology to analyze Goddess Wa's stats from the screen. Her combat power was estimated to be 30 million. According to the evaluation of the Combat Power Index, the 7 kings of the Empire had a combat power index of around 10 million. For example, the Radiant King and the newly emerged Crimson Moon King only had a combat power index of around 20 million. Although this was not their full strength, it could still be used as a reference for the evaluation. Everybody almost jumped out of their chairs after hearing the combat ability index of more than 30 million. One of the lords of the deep caves, who had threatened to kill God Wa, also flinched and felt chilled. Is she a king? Someone was surprised. I can't believe the Federation hid such a person. These damn things stole our power and cultivated a king. The king is strong but not invincible. Mobilize all the missiles and lock onto her. Kill her. Everyone regained their calmness soon. Although Goddess Wa's combat strength was beyond their imagination, the war couldn't be solved by individual force alone. They had brought a lot of advanced weapons from the Empire and seized a lot of lethal weapons from the Federation. Even if the king came, he would have to go back lying down. Ace hang mobile phone. Chapter 12:27. Many generals and directors of consortiums in the capital looked up at the microcosm of the cities in the Middle East. They held their breath as they watched the red dots disappear one by one. The people of the Federation who were watching the live broadcast once again showed hope in their despairing eyes. They were excited as they watched the scene. Time passed, and the red dot was shrinking with every passing moment. Dean mobilized the monitoring system of the cities that had been cleaned up. Everyone saw that the cities were in a mess. There were traces of fighting everywhere. There were huge craters caused by missile bombardment. Blood flowed like rivers in the street. Countless corpses of the demons were scattered on the ground. The whole city was bleeding. In this desolate scene, some survivors could be seen carefully walking out of the shelter and looking on the street. Some civilians were holding their wristwatches. It seemed that the wristwatches were broadcasting the news live. They also saw through the live news that the city they lived in had been cleaned up and there were no demons left. Soon, more and more people came out of their hiding places. Most of them had disheveled hair and dirty faces. After these people learned that their city was safe through the live broadcast of the news, they came out of their hiding places. Seeing the streets full of demon corpses and the unprecedented silence, they couldn't help but roar in excitement. Even if their voices were hoarse, they didn't have any scruples. There were also people who ran to spread the news loudly, letting other survivors who were curled up in the nest know about it. Countless survivors who didn't know each other felt sympathetic when they saw each other. Some hugged and some cheered together. Many people in other cities felt the same way when they saw this scene, and tears streamed down their cheek. In the blink of an eye, half an hour passed. Everyone saw that the gathering of the demons in the Middle East had changed. The red dots of the demons gathered in the same place, and then retreated outside the Middle East region. Obviously, the strong attack of Goddess Wa had frightened the demons who were ready to resist. They had no choice but to retreat. When a general said, "They are ready to escape," according to the information, countless people felt shocked. Half an hour ago, the Middle East was still a sea of demons, which gave them a headache. At this moment, it had been cleared out, and these horrible demons were beaten back. Everything seemed like a dream, but from the screen, the audience could almost see how dangerous the battle was when Goddess Wa was annihilating the devil race. This was not an act, but a real fist to repel these devils. For a time, many generals found that their understanding of Dean couldn't be defined as a demon. However, no one would believe that he was a god. But in any case, Dean had slaughtered the demons and saved the Federation. In less than an hour, Goddess Wa returned. She still looked like a moon elf, pure and flawless. Her body was shrouded in a hazy silver radiance, making her look incomparably holy. Her perfect face was tranquil and elegant, as if there was not a speck of dust on it. It was clear that he had just fought a great battle, but there were no wounds on his body at all. It was as if he had just taken a bath. Such battle prowess shocked everyone, and all of them were filled with admiration. "I've said that I'll expel all the demons today, so I'll definitely do it." Dean smiled as he looked at the returning god of Wa. "The Middle East region has been cleaned up. Now we will start to clean up the second region." "Which region is second only to the Middle East?" The generals looked at each other. One of them whispered, "In addition to the Middle East, the Northwest region is the most severely affected. Many cities there have run out of food and water. Everyone is in danger." "That's the Northwest region," Dean said without hesitation. He looked at Goddess Wa. "You go there." Goddess Wa smiled and nodded. She left again. The people in front of the live broadcast were excited. The fierce demons were like ants in front of Dean. He could destroy them at any time. The Middle East region was the best evidence. The generals accompanied Dean to observe the situation in the Northwest region through the monitor. It didn't take long for them to see that the number of demons in the area had decreased significantly. They knew that Goddess Wa had arrived. Soon, a city was cleaned up. Dean asked people to pull up the monitoring of the city. Once again, countless people were excited. The generals of the Federation and the directors of the Terrace Financial Group were all shocked. They had a feeling that the situation was irreversible. Perhaps all the demons within the Federation's borders would really be exterminated within a day. What would it mean if this matter was completed? They didn't need to think to know that the people of the Federation would regard Dean as a god from now on. Dean's status in the Federation would be unshakable. Even if the authoritative figures jumped out to accuse him, Dean would use the previous strange means to turn them into demons and kill them on the spot. Most of their families would be implicated and spurned after they died as demons. There was no solution. Everyone felt that it was almost impossible to trip Dean. In fact, it was hundreds of times more difficult than expelling the demon clan. With this in mind, many people's thoughts slowly began to move. They began to ponder over their own position. Could they change it a little and truly serve this expert in exchange for the position of a doyen? Many people's eyes gradually changed as they thought about this. Dean could feel the changes around him, but he didn't care about it. Everything was within his expectations. People's hearts were unpredictable, but 90% of the people's hearts could be manipulated by the word interest. On the other side, as the news of the fall of the Middle East was released, the demons in other regions all noticed the live broadcast of the news and learned about the existence of Goddess Wa. Judging from the fact that Goddess Wa conquered the Middle East and defeated hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the Empire, she was even stronger than ordinary kings, which made the demons in other regions both unwilling and angry. However, in the end, they could only retreat with the main troop. The remaining demons didn't have the idea to test the Federation after the Northwest region was wiped out. They quickly mobilized their subordinates and left the Federation at full speed. Around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the generals in the command saw that the demons had gathered in the cities of the Federation. There were only a few stragglers that could be killed at any time. Those stragglers were captured by the garrison forces that ruled the cities. At this time, the other 3 consortiums also intervened to help clean up the rest of the demons. The news was transferred to another place when the sun went down. The government officially announced that all the demons had been killed and the Federation had restored its safety. Countless people who had suffered from the disaster cried tears of joy as the news came out. However, they cried for their loved ones and loved ones who had died. The entire Federation stayed up all night. The live broadcast once again followed Dean. Dean was surrounded by the generals. He directed everyone to do post-war work, clean up the battlefield and corpses, restore the water, electricity and food in the cities, and so on. Of course, to him, all of this was just a verbal statement, and it was enough to show his will. In addition, Dean led a group of generals and senior members of the 3 consortiums to visit some of the affected cities. In just one day, many refugees knew about Dean's identity. They knelt and cried as they saw him. Dean healed some of the injured refugees. He once again showed his godlike ability. He returned to the federal government building in the capital. He ordered people to prepare for the Federation General Assembly. All the senior members of the Federation were present. Even the directors and leaders of the 4 consortiums were no exception. When the meeting started, the live broadcast of the news switched to the various cities. The army was busy transporting the injured and setting up medical tents in the dark. The various disaster cities were gradually recovering. After the preparations were done, the live broadcast once again focused on the grand meeting. After Dean's brief speech, a general immediately spoke and excitedly asked Dean to be the president of the Federation. As soon as these words were spoken, //3_3610/ Chapter 12:28. Everything in the conference hall was carried out like a rehearsal. Everyone was looking forward to the warm atmosphere. Dean was elected as the leader. Dean didn't continue to play the kind face. He pondered for a moment and said in a cold voice, "Although we have expelled the demons, but the demons will come back. While we are cheering for the victory, please look around you and see how many comrades you will never see again. Look outside and see how many people are still crying and calling the names of their loved ones." The warm atmosphere cooled down as they heard Dean's words. It was as if a basin of cold water was poured over everyone's head. Suddenly there was a bit of shame in them. Why did such a situation occur? Have you ever reflected on your actions? Dean questioned. The huge conference hall was silent. The crowd in front of the live broadcast was silent. The reason is very simple, Dean said in a cold voice. First, the Federation's top level is incompetent. That gave the demons an opportunity to take advantage of them. Second, there is no unity. Apart from the Terrace Consortium, what were the other 3 consortia doing when the demons invaded? Third, the military factions are complex. The support and intelligence sharing during the war are not in place. In short, they are in a state of disunity. A director of the Lock Consortium was about to open his mouth to argue, but was immediately pressed down by the chairman, who stared at him. The conference room remained silent. Silence was approval. The crowd in front of the live broadcast knew little about the affairs of the upper class. They suddenly realized the reason after listening to Dean. As for whether it was the real reason or not, they didn't analyze it. First, they couldn't analyze it. Second, Dean's identity meant that he couldn't lie in their mind. After all, he was a god. Whatever God said was right, it was right. This corrupt system should be abandoned long ago. Dean's eyes were filled with disdain. You are a group. The entire Federation is a group. There only needs to be one voice in the group. Only in this way, the execution and efficiency will be greatly improved. It will also reduce the internal strife. So I think it is necessary to abandon the federal system and adopt a centralized system. I will temporarily manage the entire Federation before the demons are eliminated. From now on, the word Federation will be removed and changed to Dynasty. Do you have any objections? Everyone in the conference hall had long known that Dean would centralize power to rule the Federation. At the moment, they all sighed in their hearts. They knew that things had come to this point and could no longer be changed. However, such a change in the system would naturally harm the interests of many people. It was a director of the Milan consortium who jumped out as soon as Dudian finished his words. Please forgive me for not agreeing. This director's face was full of anger. He seemed to have suppressed it for a long time, but he still maintained his rationality and said, "The reason why the demons were able to invade the peace circle this time is because the demon emperor personally led the 7 great kings to attack. It has nothing to do with the federal system. Even if it was a centralized system, facing today's result, the result would still be the same. I don't think there's a need." Dean raised his hand and interrupted him, but he didn't explain. "Guard, take him out." The man didn't expect Dean to act without scruples. He couldn't help but shout, "You can't do this to me." The guards on standby around the conference hall were expressionless. They stepped forward and dragged him out of the chair. "Stop. What he said is right. Why should we take him out? Do you really think that you are a god? Don't think that we don't know your true identity. Do you believe that I won't expose your false face in front of everyone?" Voices were heard from all over the conference hall. The more people spoke, the louder the voices became. Dean quietly looked at the 8 people who jumped out. He said, "Is there anyone else who has the same idea as them?" The other generals and directors of the terrorist consortium who were in the headquarters didn't look sideways. It seemed as if they didn't see anything. They knew better than these people that Dean wasn't as kind as he had shown on the live broadcast. God? Even if he was a god, he was an evil god. Since there is no one else, then take all of them out and directly put them in prison, Dean said in a cold voice. The 8 people who spoke were stunned. Put them all in prison? This was done in front of countless people. You're a god, how could you do such an unreasonable thing? Why are you imprisoning us? We didn't commit a crime. That's right. Can't we even say a word here? If that's the case, who can say anything when the Federation falls into your hands in the future? 2 people were anxious and angry as they saw the guards come over. Obliterate the blasphemers. Dean said to Goddess Wa, who was next to him. Clean them all up. Goddess Wa knew what Dean meant and what he was planning. She showed a rare serious look on her beautiful face. She seemed to be irritated by the words of these people. She was covered in a hazy silver light, looking as pure and holy as when she annihilated the demon clan. She raised her hand and several beams of light shot out, hitting the 8 people who were talking. The 8 people stiffened, and the next moment, their bodies shattered like ice crystals, turning into sparkling powder and drifting away. Nothing was left. The whole conference hall was silent. Everyone looked at the scene in disbelief. They didn't expect that Dean would dare to kill people in front of hundreds of millions of people. Didn't he care about the God image that he had created? Some people couldn't believe it, but some people seemed to understand. They couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. I know that changing the system will harm the interests of some vermin. So they couldn't help but jump out. But I didn't think that there would be so many. Dean glanced at the audience. I know that some of you have the same idea as them. But you are smart enough to choose to hide. I know all of your thoughts. I didn't pull you out because the Federation has just suffered a disaster. It needs people to help rebuild their homes. In the future, if I find that you have the behavior of vermin again, I won't forgive you. Everyone looked at each other and didn't dare to say a word. In front of the live broadcast, the audience saw that Dean had ordered God of Wa to kill 8 people. However, they weren't afraid or blaming him. On the contrary, they were excited. This was God. He was thinking about everything for them. As for the 8 people who jumped out to accuse God, they were cursed before Dean could act. When they were killed, many people clapped their hands and cheered. Many people didn't have a good impression of the high-level officials of the Federation. On the contrary, Dean, who had expelled the demons and saved them from fear, made them feel grateful. Through this incident, people felt that Dean was a god. God naturally had the majesty of a god. It was a mortal sin to be questioned by mortals. Chapter 12:29. At the meeting, Dean only put forward the idea of reform. He didn't announce the specific policies and treaties immediately. Although the people believed in him, it would inevitably cause unnecessary chaos if he changed people's living habits too quickly. Recovering the Federation was the first step. The significance of the Federation for him was just a stepping stone to rule the Empire and the Fire Dragon country. After he integrated the human forces, it meant that he would master the most powerful force and the richest resources in the world. At that time, even if he couldn't find a way to solve the undeaths in the past, he could pour all the resources for related research in the future. As the leader of the old era, he subconsciously believed that technology was omnipotent. If it wasn't, it could only mean that the level of technology was too low. After the meeting, the whole Federation was like a huge machine running at full speed. The injuries and grassroots construction were handed over to the officials. Dean called the 4 consortiums for a separate meeting. The real upper-class group of the Federation was still the 4 consortiums. Most of the power was in their hands, including the policy direction of the old Federation. Of course, this interference was all part of Lin Chongqing's plan to make them think so. In reality, everything was under Lin Chongqing's control through the Terrace Financial Group. Integrating the power of the 4 consortiums and unified management was the first step to change the federal system to a centralized dynasty system. The power of the federal system was too loose. Most of it was in the hands of the 4 consortiums. What Dean wanted to do was to take back the power in their hands and give them the corresponding right. Obviously, this was by no means superfluous. Doubts, resistance, and other discordant voices were suppressed by Dean's violent means. The 4 consortiums were sitting in the clouds overlooking hundreds of millions of people. In front of Dean, they were like sheep in the eyes of a tiger. They had no ability to resist. All the actions of Dean would inevitably lead to damage to the interests of some people. It would also lead to the tragic death of countless people. But these were not exposed to the public. The people were trying to get used to the new policies and order brought by the new god. What was order? It was the rules set by the superior for the inferior. Overall, Dean's rules were quite loose for the people. After all, the establishment of a new dynasty needed to please the people in the early stage to facilitate management. Once the situation was stable, there would be squeezing and corruption. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The pain in the various cities of the Federation had gradually been healed. Some hidden in the dark had already scabbed. The people enjoyed a lot of post-disaster benefits, and they were even more in awe, love, and respect for this new god. However, in the upper class, after half a month of iron and blood punishment, everyone was terrified of this god. Whenever they saw people kneeling and praying in front of the statues of Dean and Goddess Wa in the news, they would sigh bitterly in their hearts. This was not a god, but a cruel and hypocritical devil. After half a month of consolidation, Dean felt that the Federation had gradually stabilized. All the unstable factors had been removed in this half a month. In this process, Lin Chongqing's memory once again helped him a lot. Lin Chongqing had a very good understanding of the 4 consortiums, military generals and federal officials. Lin Chongqing knew all of their private secret. Dudian easily made them disarm and surrender. Now the mechanical heart is in my body and the intelligence of the Federation's brain has been restored. I can no longer control the brain to monitor the entire Federation. I have to train a group of loyal subordinates to manage the country in the future. Dean thought of Noyce and the others who were far away in the Empire. There was a trace of nostalgia in his heart. He immediately called Jacelady. You will be in charge of the matters here for the time being. Perform well, and maybe I will give you a good seat in the future when I ascend the throne. Jacelady was happy. These days he found that Dean didn't target him because he was a loyal servant of Lin Chongqing. It seemed that Dean didn't care about the former enmity. Dean's character was cruel, but he was broad-minded. In the beginning, he didn't want to be a puppet. He wanted to get rid of Lin Chongqing's control. Now that Lin Chongqing was dead, although he thought about rebelling against Dean, he found that Dean was more difficult to deal with than Lin Chongqing. Since he couldn't oppose Dean, he might as well surrender. Even if he had to submit to Dean, he would still have a high position. It would be much better than the people in the world. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will do my best. Jacelady curiously asked, Your Majesty, did you say in the future? Are you not going to ascend the throne now? I will ascend the throne after I wipe out the demon race and the fire dragon country. Dudian indifferently said, What's the point of being the ruler of a country? Don't worry. I won't wait for too long. It will take at most half a year. With his current strength, it would only take a few days to wipe out the Empire and the Fire Dragon country. The reason why he said half a year was to give the residents time to adapt. He didn't want to waste his people's power after the merger. Ruler of the world? Jacelady's pupils shrank. He didn't expect Dean's heart to be so big. He wanted to conquer the demon race and the Fire Dragon country. He wanted to be the king of all living beings. However, it was not difficult to understand why Dean would have such an idea. I know, Your Majesty. Jacelady quickly responded. I will go to the demon race and kill the demon emperor. I will be back in a few days. Dean indifferently said, You can leave if there is nothing else. A monstrous wave was set off in Jacelady's heart, but he was very shrewd. Shock flashed on his face as he respectfully excused himself. He knew how terrifying the demon emperor was. Lin Chongqing had mentioned it many times in front of him. But Dean could kill Lin Chongqing, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the demon emperor. The sky of this planet is really going to change. Jacelady was shocked and excited as he walked out of the building. He felt that he was going to experience the arrival of a new era, and the master of this era was Dean. Although he wasn't the most dazzling person, but he could enjoy endless wealth and power by following such a person. Dean was ready to leave the Federation. He didn't have too many arrangements. It was very convenient for him to go to the Empire. If the Demon Emperor was in the capital, then he could fly there in the morning and return in the afternoon after killing the Demon Emperor. God, let's go, Dean said to the girl next to him. Chapter 12:30. South of the Empire's border, in the sky above the Battle God Wall. The clouds were misty, and there was a gap in the sky above the Battle God Wall. Above the gap, there was a cotton-like sea of clouds. At this moment, many streams of purple light flashed past. They were actually birds with purple lightning coiling around them. They were happily shuttling through the layers of clouds, gathering into dark clouds to feed on the lightning. This was the forbidden area in the sky above the Battle God Wall, and it was guarded by them. At the peak of the clouds, there was a bird master dressed like a priest. His body was as light as a feather, and he sat on the clouds. This was his ability. He could turn his body into the weight of a mayfly, allowing him to shuttle through the world effortlessly. However, his battle prowess was relatively weak. He was a professional thunderbird herder nurtured by the Empire. At this moment, when this bird master was half asleep, he suddenly sensed two thunderbirds rushing out from the clouds. They broke away from the flock and flew toward the inner part of the Battle God Wall. He opened his eyes and glanced in that direction. He frowned slightly and took out a specially made whistle to blow it. The flock of thunderbirds in the surroundings stirred and gathered over. However, the two thunderbirds that had broken away from the flock continued to fly away without turning back. Seeing this, the bird master's face darkened. He stopped whistling, and with a flash of his body, he flew out like a transparent soul. His speed was incomparably fast, and he quickly caught up with the two thunderbirds. With a light shout, he raised his hand to capture them. Suddenly, one of the thunderbirds turned its head. Its sharp and long beak shrank, and its furry face turned into a handsome human face. Its expression was incomparably indifferent, and its pitch-black eyes were indifferent to the extreme. It let out a soft snort. "You!" The birdmaster couldn't help but be astonished when he saw this change. Before he could say anything, he felt a tremor in his mind, and his consciousness was instantly thrown into chaos. At the next instant blood flowed out from the birdmaster's mouth, nose and eyes, covering his entire face like earthworms. It was a horrifying sight. His body also fell limply and floated in the air, becoming a floating corpse. Swoosh! The two thunderbirds didn't even turn their heads and turned to fly away. A few hours later, in the sky above the giant wall, two figures flew over from the faraway horizon, like meteorites falling from the clouds. They whistled past the heads of the guards above the giant wall, causing many guards to exclaim in surprise. Someone immediately reported this scene to the wall lord. Whoosh! When the two of them descended to a height of tens of meters inside the giant wall, they slowly slowed down. The strong wind pressure caused the flowers and grass on the ground to bend. It seemed that even the flowers and grass were kneeling to greet them. Dudien's eyes were like stars as he stood in the air. He released his perception to the fullest. His perception easily covered the entire giant wall. Tens of millions of people appeared in his retinas like countless red spots. Soon he found familiar smells and voices. It was Noyce, Barton and others. The next moment, Dean flew towards Aurora, who was closest to him. In Flying Snow Town, a cavalry troop was stationed at the entrance of the mayor's house. At this moment, the mayor's house was welcoming a distinguished guest. All the delicacies in town and the mayor's collection of fine wine were served on the table. The mayor personally poured the wine and accompanied the guest. And this distinguished guest was the second daughter of the Stantine family. The Stantine family was an old noble family in Phoenix, Maine City. Their territory was extremely large, and Flying Snow Town was just a small town under their business chain. The second daughter of the owner's family passed by, so the mayor had to entertain her warmly. "Don't you know that we are tracking the traces of the ferret?" The second daughter's name was Avia. She was wearing a set of silver lady's armor. Her chest and buttocks were wrapped in a perfect arc. Her long red hair was slightly curled and draped over her shoulders. There was a bit of arrogance in her eyes. She was in sharp contrast to the mayor, who was wearing rough clothes. "Second miss, I've already asked the most experienced hunters in town. They didn't find any traces of ferret magical beasts in the vicinity of the town. If such magical beasts were to appear in the vicinity of our town, I'm afraid there would have been people sacrificed in the town. However, there hasn't been any population loss in the town in the past few months, so I'm afraid I can't help you." The mayor smiled awkwardly. She took a sip of the red wine from the mayor's collection and frowned slightly. The taste was really hard for her to swallow, but the good upbringing of her family prevented her from vomiting on the spot. Eventually, she swallowed it. Looking at the table full of roasted lamb and suckling pig, she felt that it was already tasteless. She stood up and said, "Let's go, Aurora." "Yes, Mississippi," a short-haired girl beside her nodded with a cold expression. She held a sword in her arms and nodded. The mayor was a little surprised. He didn't expect her to not eat after he had prepared so many delicacies, but he didn't dare to force her to stay. He hurriedly went up to her and said, "Second miss, let me see you out." Avia nodded slightly and didn't refuse. She led the knights out of the door. Their armor and swords clanked against each other. It was very pleasing to the ear. Just as she stepped out of the door, Avia raised her head and looked into the distance. It was a habit of hers. Looking into the distance always made her feel that she had a big goal. But when she looked, she suddenly saw two black shadows appear in the distant sky. The next moment, the black shadows expanded rapidly. In the time it took to take a breath, they grew from small silhouettes to faces. It was a man and a woman. Both of them had almost perfect faces. "Who is it?" At this moment, the night squires around them also sensed it. They quickly drew their swords and stood guard beside Avia. The sword-wielding girl beside Avia looked up. Her indifferent expression suddenly froze. Her eyes widened slightly, revealing a bit of astonishment. Then, there was a hint of surprise hidden deep in her eyes. Whoosh! 2 figures whistled through the air and landed 10 meters in front of the crowd. They looked down at the crowd, bringing with them a powerful wind pressure that caused the crowd to feel as if a gale was blowing on their faces, causing their hair to flutter. Dean's indifferent eyes fell on Aurora in the crowd, but he didn't open his mouth. "You are." Avia felt a huge pressure coming from Dean's body. Her heart was shocked. This pressure was stronger than her teacher's. She was about to open her mouth when a surprised voice came from behind her. "Teacher." Aurora called out in joy. She took a few steps forward but suddenly thought of something. She bowed and saluted. "Teacher, you are finally back." Avia was stunned. She looked at Aurora, who was bowing respectfully. "Aurora, what nonsense are you talking about? If teacher hears you, he won't let you off easily." Aurora didn't apologize as obediently as she remembered. Instead, she looked up at the youth as if she didn't hear anything. "Did you worship a teacher?" Dean heard the girl's words and asked Aurora. Aurora lowered her head. "Yes, teacher. But I just wanted to learn and get close to the upper-class forces. I didn't really regard him as a teacher." "Good job." Dean nodded. He didn't blame Aurora at all. Avia and the other knights were dumbfounded. One must know that Aurora and Avia were both apprentices of the Phoenix Lord. Avia was even more proud of it. One must know that the Phoenix Lord was one of the strongest in the abyss of the giant wall. His status was extremely high. If Aurora's words were to spread out, then even if she didn't die in the future, she would still lose a layer of skin. "Are you crazy?" Avia couldn't help but shout. "What about the others?" Dean asked. Aurora replied. "Noyce and the others have gone to other main cities. But your friend Zack seems to have had an accident. I don't know the specific situation. I've been learning from the Phoenix Lord, so I don't have many opportunities to come in contact with them." Dean wrinkled his brows as he remembered that he didn't sense Zack's aura. His heart sank. Zack and Mason were his companions when they were scavengers. Although they couldn't fight side by side now, but they represented his childhood memories. "Come with me to find them," Dean said. Aurora nodded. "Yes." Avia was confused. She had never left the giant wall. Naturally, she didn't think that Dean and Aurora were from the outer wall. If it was another abyss powerhouse, then they would be able to guess it from these words alone. "Aurora, do you know what you are talking about? Both of you will be finished if teacher hears you." Avia couldn't help but grab Aurora's arm. Dean seemed to notice Avria, but there was no fluctuation in his eyes as his eyes fell on her beautiful face. "Is this your friend or enemy? Are you going to solve it?" Aurora's heart jumped. "Teacher, Miss Avia is my friend. She is also a student of the Phoenix Lord. Moreover, she is a miss of the Stantine family. She takes good care of me." Dean replied. "Since you are indebted to them, then give the city to them." Aurora was shocked as she heard Dean's words. She knew Dean's character. Did teacher want to kill the Lord of the Giant Wall? Avria was stunned when she heard Dean's words. She couldn't help but laugh. She couldn't help but open her mouth to ridicule, but Aurora's reaction was extremely fast. She quickly covered her mouth and shook her head. "Let's go." Dean didn't stay any longer as he flew forward. Chapter 12:31. Aurora was anxious as she saw Dean fly away. She quickly followed him. "Aurora, do you really want to go?" Avia hurriedly pulled her. If Aurora left, today's matter was bound to spread to her teacher's ears. At that time, no one could save her. "Littleya, I want to follow my teacher. He promised to give your family a city, and your family will also rise in the future." Aurora pried Olivia's slender hand away and turned to her with a serious expression. "What city? He is not His Majesty. He can't give people a fief." Avia felt that Aurora was bewitched and wanted to wake her up. Aurora saw her thoughts but didn't explain much. It's not a city, it's the giant wall. My teacher is a great and strong man. You will soon be able to witness it. She turned and quickly ran after Dean's back. After a few ups and downs, she stepped on the houses of the town and flew up to catch up. Avia stared blankly at the back of the three leaving figures. She felt that it was ridiculous. The gift was not a city, but the giant wall? For her, the giant wall was the whole world. But a stranger actually said that he would give the world to her family. This was simply crazy. She quickly reacted and glanced at the surrounding knights and squires. She knew that this matter couldn't be concealed. The matter of Aurora rebelling against the Phoenix Lord would soon spread to her teacher's ears. She couldn't cover it up, otherwise her family would be implicated. In that case, she could only take the initiative to report the matter. I'm sorry, Aurora. You are too confused. Teacher, who is this? Aurora followed Dean as he jumped through the forest. She saw a beautiful girl behind Dean. Even though she was a girl, she was amazed. She couldn't help but ask curiously. She knew that her teacher had a sweetheart for a long time. Could it be that time could really wear away everything? Was this teacher's new sweetheart? Her name is Godwa. She is equivalent to my child. Dean casually introduced. Child. Aurora was stunned. Wasn't he not married? How could he have a child? But looking at Dean's expression, it was obvious that he didn't want to talk about it. Soon, the two came to the nearest city. Dean found a hotel and asked Aurora to gather everyone here at the fastest speed. It didn't matter even if their identity was exposed. Aurora received the order and immediately sent a letter to the people of each city. Teacher, are you going to leave here? Aurora asked curiously. Dean nodded. I'll take you to the imperial capital. Aurora was shocked. During this period of time, she had gathered a lot of information from the Phoenix Lord, including some information about the imperial capital. She knew that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the imperial capital. Although there weren't many people in the abyss, they weren't all that rare either. The Abyss Master, who was above the abyss, was a giant in the imperial capital. As for the kings, they were kings who looked down on the entire imperial capital. In that kind of environment, they had to be more careful. They didn't dare to get angry, and didn't dare to be arrogant. After a moment, Dean led the team back from the giant wall of Sylvia. Noyce, Barton, Mason, Sergei and other familiar faces appeared. All of them were excited to see Dean. They felt like rootless duckweed and homeless. Dean was like the core of their big family. Master, you are finally back. Dean, you are back. We have been waiting for you for a long time. We have done all the things that you have asked us to do. I have infiltrated an old aristocratic family in West Shell. I am the captain of their family's private army. In addition to excitement and surprise, everyone took the initiative to tell Dean about what had happened during this period of time and reported the things they had inquired about to Dean. Dean had a faster way to know everything. For example, he could check their memories. But he didn't do that. He was not in a hurry. He listened to them slowly and waited for others to come. After a few hours, most of the people had arrived. The rest hadn't arrived yet. Some of them were killed in the fight. Where is Zack? Dudian asked as he saw Macon arrive. Mason's excited expression stiffened as he heard Dean's words. He was silent for a moment. Dean, Zack sneaked into the army to steal confidential information. But he was found. He paused for a moment. He is dead. The hall became quiet. Everyone was silent. In addition to Zack, many people had been sacrificed. But their relationship with Dean was far less than Zack and Dean's. Dean took a deep breath and said, Since it is a blood debt, it will be paid with blood. Mason's face slightly changed. Dean, don't be impulsive. There is more than one abyssal on the giant wall. We are outnumbered and will suffer a big loss. It won't be too late to take revenge when we are stronger. Dean looked at him. You have matured. Mason smiled. I have seen so many things. If I'm not mature then I would be mentally retarded. Dean stood up and glanced at Sergei, Noyce, Aurora and others. I have summoned you to take you to the Imperial capital. I will take you to the Imperial capital. I will take you to witness it and exercise your courage and mind. In the future when I get the world you will enjoy endless wealth and right. If you are in a high position then you must have a high attitude. This is a training for you. Everyone was stunned as they looked at each other. They wondered if there was an illusion in their ears. Attack the Imperial capital? Many of them knew what kind of behemoth the Imperial capital was. For them, even a giant wall under the control of the Empire was enough to make them feel breathless. Not to mention the Imperial capital. Dean knew their thoughts but he didn't care. It was because he knew the limitations of their thinking that he found them before killing the Demon Emperor. He wanted to take them to the Imperial capital so that they could see the wider world. In the future when they worked for him they wouldn't be scared by the momentum of their subordinate. This move could be described as well-intentioned. Master, the difference between the Imperial capital and the giant wall is like heaven and earth. Noyce looked at Dean and cautiously said. He was disappointed in his heart. In his mind, the young master had always been a strategist. He would never make such a rash mistake. Don't worry. I know everything about the Imperial capital. A mere king can be destroyed with a flick of my finger. Dean interrupted him and looked at everyone. My current strength is not the same as before. The abyss isn't even worthy to carry my shoes. You just need to relax and follow me to conquer the world. In the future you will manage the world for me. Everyone looked at each other in disbelief. Some of Noyce's trusted subordinates couldn't help but speculate in their heart. Was there something wrong with the master's mind? However, they didn't dare to say it out loud. Come with me to the capital. Dean didn't continue to talk as he walked out of the hall. The hotel was booked by Aurora. The entire hall was filled with their people. At the moment when Dean came out, they separated into two groups and followed him out. Out of the hotel, Dean unscrupulously changed his wings and soared into the sky, causing the surrounding passers-by to exclaim. Noyce pulled Aurora. You are the first one to see the young master. Do you think he is normal? Aurora rolled her eyes in annoyance and said, Don't you feel that teacher's aura is far more powerful than before? I feel that with his strength, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to kill the abyss. Perhaps he has already reached the level of a king tier in the Imperial capital. Noyce's eyes lit up. It is possible. Let's go, Aurora said. Noyce, Mason and others led the others to catch up with Dean. Some of them had the ability to fly while others jumped on the ground to follow Dean. The group of people jumped from many buildings in the city and went straight towards the capital. This scene alarmed the city lord. The commander of the city guards was sent to block the edge of the city. When he saw Dean flying over, he immediately stepped forward to stop him. But Dean didn't stop. He didn't see how he did it, but the commander of the city guards was hit by the air. He suddenly groaned and flew out. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Dean went straight to the capital after flying out of the city. He crossed the mountains and rushed into one city after another. Along the way the city guards came to intercept him. But they weren't able to get close to him before they were sent flying. //3_3610/ Chapter 1232. When Dean led Noyce and others arrived at the giant wall, they saw that the capital was heavily guarded. Pioneers were standing on the giant wall like javelins. They were led by inner wilderness level and inner wilderness level generals. They seemed to know where Dean and others were coming from. Only the south side of the city was heavily guarded. Noyce and others' faces changed. They were ready to stop, but Dean was still flying forward. He didn't have any intention to slow down. They couldn't help but be startled. But then they quickly followed up. Who are you? A commander in golden armor was standing in midair. His eyes were cold and filled with killing intent as he looked down at the crowd. He shouted at Dean, who was at the front. "You don't deserve to know." Dean's face was indifferent. He clasped his hands behind his back and rushed forward like a rainbow. It seemed that he didn't care about the many soldiers on the city wall. The golden-armored ruler's face turned cold, and the bat-like wings on his back expanded by several meters. His teeth turned into fangs, causing his face to change shape. Just as he was about to transform into his demonic form, a cold light suddenly shot out. His entire body broke out in a cold sweat, and he felt an extreme sense of danger lock onto his body. He was so frightened that he couldn't move. At this moment, he felt the heat in his body was taken away from his eyebrows. Bang! The golden armor master fell from the air. His half-demon body fell on the city wall. His armor fell on the ground. "Get lost!" Dean flew to the top of the city wall. He raised his hand and his palm became hundreds of meters big. It swept across the city wall as if he was smoothing the dust on a table. The pioneers and inner wilderness level warriors on the city wall were all dumbfounded. Before they could react, they felt as if they had been hit by a giant mountain. An irresistible force pushed them into the air, making them feel dizzy and dizzy. After Dean waved his hand, the giant palm quickly retracted. It seemed that the previous scene was just an illusion to everyone. He moved forward without the slightest pause. This scene not only shocked the soldiers on the wall, but also made Noyce and the others dumbfounded. What kind of magic mark ability is this? A hand that's hundreds of meters long can be turned into a hand? As far as they knew, there was no magic mark that had such an ability. After a short period of sluggishness, everyone quickly reacted. Thinking of Dean's previous words, they quickly followed up. Hundreds of meters high walls were easily climbed by their feet. While everyone was climbing up, the generals and guards in the distance finally recovered. Under the roar of one of the generals, everyone immediately used their demonification ability and rushed towards Noyce and the others. "You don't know my tolerance." Dean frowned. He didn't wait for Noyce and others to make a move. He waved his hand and his palm expanded rapidly. It turned into a crescent moon-like giant sickle that was hundreds of meters long. Bang! A huge mark was left on the wall from the top of the wall to the bottom of the wall. All the guards on the edge of the mark were cut in half. In his eyes it was a casual move, but in the eyes of others it was a shocking blow. The rest of the guards trembled in fear. They didn't dare to think about such a terrifying power. However, Dean didn't take back the giant scythe this time. He chopped several times, and the entire southern city wall was cut into several huge ditches. Even the people in the distance could see it clearly. The surviving guards stood rooted to the ground, not daring to move recklessly. Dean took back the giant scythe and continued to fly forward. Noyce and others were shocked. They finally saw Dean's strength. It was far from what they saw when they left. Everyone was surprised and excited to keep up with Dean. They jumped over the buildings along the way. The civilians in the capital hadn't heard about the incident. They were surprised to see a large number of strong people jumping up and down. It must be known that the security of the capital was strict. Such a scene had never happened before. Some carriages of nobles were trampled on. The ladies and young masters jumped out of the carriages and cursed. However, the perpetrators had already flown away from the place. In less than 10 minutes, they arrived in front of the palace. At the moment, a large number of guards were gathered outside the palace. They had already known about the fall of the city wall. Above the palace, with 1,000 steps, numerous guards lined up on both sides. Each of the guards was a pioneer-level warrior. Standing in the front were 3 figures with extraordinary bearings. The one in the middle was wearing a black and gold royal robe. He slightly raised his chin as if he was used to looking down on the crowd. Beside him were a white-haired old man with a hunched back and a mature, beautiful woman in a red dress. "Teacher!" Aurora's pupil shrank when she saw the woman in red dress. She didn't expect that teacher to come to the capital to help the Wall Lord. Dean flew to the top of the palace. Everyone had to look up at him. He looked down at the many strong people gathered in front of the palace hall. Who is the Wall Lord? Stand up. Although his tone was flat, it had unquestionable majesty. Bold. With an angry shout, a middle-aged man dressed in a royal robe and dressed like an official stood out from behind the three of them. Before he could take 2 steps, his body suddenly flew backwards, smashing through the wall of the royal hall, and he stopped breathing. This unexpected change made everyone's face suddenly change. The 3 leaders couldn't hold their faces, and their expressions became cold. They looked at Dean with a bit of fear in their eyes because even they didn't know how Dean made his move. They had never heard of such a strange ability, but they could infer that the person who came was indeed from outside the giant wall. Which giant wall do you come from? Or from the imperial capital? The middle-aged man in black gold robe slowly opened his mouth. His attitude was very calm. Dean's eyes fell on him. Are you the wall's leader? You are at the middle level of the abyss. You are a little stronger than the 2 beside you. You can indeed command them. I will give you a quarter of an hour to hand over the people in charge of punishment and secrets of the military. Why are you looking for them? Did they offend you? The middle-aged man in black gold robe slightly frowned. There was a trace of vigilance in his eyes. Dean could see through his strength, but he was still so calm. It showed that he wasn't afraid of him. Dean's eyes fell on him. After a moment, he slowly said, It seems that you don't cherish this quarter of an hour. Since that's the case, you should die early. What? The middle-aged man was startled. He didn't expect that Dean would turn hostile. They had 3 abyss experts on their side. The next moment, he saw Dean raise his hand. His palm suddenly changed to hundreds of meters in size. It was like a giant mountain that blocked the light above everyone's head. The shadow shrouded everyone as the palm came down. The people in front of the palace were shocked. Although they knew about the fall of the city walls, but they didn't see the battle. Dean's ability at the moment was completely different from what they imagined. The palm still had the appearance of a human hand, but the size was terrifying. The middle-aged man in black gold robe was shocked, but he quickly recovered. His eyes flashed with anger and killing intent. He suddenly rose into the sky and his whole body was demonized. He tore his robe and changed into a 7 or 8 meters long dragonman. He looked like an ancient Jurassic dinosaur, but he had a pair of wings on his back and a sharp horn on his forehead. He looked up to the sky and spat out a blazing flame. The flame could melt steel immediately. Even the Phoenix Lord, who was also good at fire, was afraid of it. Whoosh! The flame beam hit the palm of the giant palm, but it didn't penetrate immediately. The giant palm was still pressing down unstoppably. When the others in the surroundings saw this, all of them fled in terror. Impossible! The middle-aged man in black gold robe was horrified. His flame had no effect? He was ready to retreat, but the palm covered hundreds of meters and covered the entire front hall of the palace. It was too late for him to escape the range of the palm. He could only drill into the ground. Boom! The giant palm smashed down and the earth shook. The magnificent golden palace hall was smashed into ashes. Countless dust overflowed from the gaps of the fingers. The thousands of high steps were smashed and a deep palm print was left on the ground. In the next moment, the giant palm shrunk, becoming smaller and smaller, disappearing into the dust. A moment later, the palm rose up from the dust and shrunk to 12 meters in size. 2 of its fingers were carrying an object 7 to 8 meters in size. It was the dragonoid that the black gold-robed middle-aged man had demonized. The thick thumb and index finger pinched the dragonman's head. The lower body of the dragonman was powerless. Dean gently shook twice and the tentacles between his fingers plunged into the dragonman's brain. He rummaged through the memories and soon finished reading. After that, his fingers exerted a little force. The dragon man's skull cracked and blood overflowed. //3_3610/ Chapter 1233. The guards outside the palace were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Noyce, Aurora and others were shocked as they looked at the Wall Lord's body that fell into the dust. Dudian had killed the Wall Lord as if he was an ant. Dudian's extraordinary power deterred all the surviving guards outside the palace. No one dared to come forward. No one dared to take revenge for the Wall Lord. The world was silent. Whoosh! A red figure flew out from the edge of the dust cloud. It was Phoenix Lord. She had a premonition of danger as the palm fell. She dodged in advance and was lucky enough to survive. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Dudian crush the Wall Lord's body. However, she was in a high position for a long time and her mind was firm. She quickly reacted and rushed out of the dust cloud. She knew that it was useless to hide in front of such a person. It would only speed up her death. It was better to take the initiative to admit defeat and surrender. Elder, please forgive me. Phoenix Lord knelt in the air. Her heart was trembling. She was afraid that Dudian would kill her. Dean indifferently glanced at her. There were a total of 3 abyss experts, including the Wall Lord. The old man with the white beard tried to resist his palm with the Wall Lord, but was smashed on the spot. But this one escaped in advance. She wasn't his main target, so he was too lazy to split a sharp blade from his palm to kill her. Since you know your crime, then retreat, Dudian indifferently said. The Phoenix Lord heaved a sigh of relief. She respectfully lowered her head and retreated to the side. She didn't look sideways and only looked at the tips of her feet. Because she was bowing her head, she quickly saw many figures following Dean. At a glance, she saw a familiar figure. Wasn't it her latest student? Aurora! Phoenix Lord was startled. Dean closed his eyes but soon opened them again. They are all in the King's City. I don't have to look for them. After saying that, he suddenly raised his hand. His arm grew upwards, reaching a height of 1,000 meters. He clenched his palm into a fist, and a diamond-shaped crystal appeared on the surface. Under the refraction of the sunlight, it was colorful. Suddenly, dozens of light beams shot out, sweeping towards the buildings outside the palace like lasers. Bang! Bang! Every region was shaken and filled with dust. It was as if they had been hit by a rocket. Dudian retracted his palm and looked at Noyce and others. Let's go and get ready to leave. Through the memory of the Wall Lord, Dean killed all the military personnel who were involved in the Zax matter. There was nothing left in this place. Everyone looked at each other. They thought about what Dean had said before. They couldn't help but feel reluctant and excited. Some of them thought that it was better to kill the wall leader and occupy the magpie's nest. Why should they continue to fight and kill? But they didn't dare to express their thoughts. Dean thought of something before leaving. He looked at the Phoenix Lord. You are the only one left here. I promised a little girl that I would give the giant wall to her. You will supervise this matter. From now on you will protect the little girl's family. Do you understand? The Phoenix Overlord's heart shuddered. This gigantic wall was actually given away so casually? She saw that Dudian's expression was indifferent. It didn't seem like he was lying. She asked, I don't know who the person is. Dudian didn't answer but looked at Aurora. Aurora understood and hurriedly stepped forward and said in a loud voice, My lord, the person my teacher is talking about is Avia. The Phoenix Lord heard her voice. Although she had noticed her before, she didn't expect her to have a teacher-student relationship with Dean. Her face couldn't help but change when she heard Aurora's words. In fact, she was very fond of her new student, but she didn't expect that the latter didn't really treat her as a teacher. She already had such a powerful person as her teacher. Why would she need her? She was the lord of a city after all. She nodded as if nothing had happened. I know. I'll do it. Dudian turned around and flew away with God of Wa. Noyce and others followed him. The Phoenix Lord looked at the backs of these people, and her heart was filled with mixed feelings. She faintly guessed that Dean had seen through her identity and let her go because of Aurora's face. Once upon a time, she had to rely on her student's face to survive. Dudian and others left the king's city without any hindrance. After half a day, they left the giant wall of Balga and stepped into the wilderness. In the evening, they officially entered the abyss area which hadn't been cleaned out by the giant wall. The night sky was clear and the stars were shining brightly. The ruins of the abyss area were as bright as day. Everyone settled in the woods and ate the food they brought with them. They rested for half a night and then continued their journey. Under the protection of Dean and God of Wa, all the abyssal monsters they met along the way were killed. The dangerous abyss seemed to have become a spring outing. Everyone followed behind them and watched the mysterious abyss area. They saw the ruins of the old era collapsed in the wilderness and covered with moss. They also saw a lot of ruins from the old era. They felt very novel. Halfway through the journey, Dean saw a dragon galloping in the air. He immediately raised his hand and shot it down from a distance. An abyss monster jumped out of the dragon. It didn't have time to rush over and shout as it was pierced by Dudian's light beam. This is the dragon messenger. He's the spokesperson of the Empire. Dudian explained to everyone. He dissected the dragon and barbecued the dragon meat as lunch. They continued their journey after eating. A few days later, they arrived at the Imperial City. They met a lot of monsters along the way. Some of them were named monsters. They also met an ancient monster. Dudian killed it and took out the soul worm. He gave it to Noise and others to seal. It would help them to quickly improve their physique after they arrived at the Imperial City. We will disguise ourselves as an Imperial adventure team. Don't expose our identity, Dudian said. Although his strength was enough to break into the Imperial City, he didn't want to alarm the Demon Emperor. The latter wasn't like the giant wall of Balga. The Demon Emperor might not be in the Imperial City at the moment. Maybe he had already set up an ambush waiting for them. Everyone didn't have any objection to Dudian's words. Chapter 1234. Imperial Capital. The majestic giant wall seemed to go straight to the sky. It was much higher than the other giant walls that Dean had seen. He thought that the giant wall was the graveyard of the Aragami. If that was the case, then the Aragami were buried in the ordinary giant wall. But the Aragami buried in the Imperial Capital were peerless characters like the ancestors of the Aragami. The Aragami that were buried in the giant wall, although they were just ordinary Aragami, they were still considered as the top masters among the Aragami race. The real ordinary Aragami were weak, not much different from the pioneers. They were not strong enough to help the giant wall suppress the monsters. Dean's eyes flashed. Killing the Demon Emperor was just a trivial matter for him. What he was really interested in was the countless secrets buried in the Imperial Capital. These secrets were related to the Aragami family. Lin Chongqing's memory didn't have them. After a moment, they approached the giant wall. Dean had some understanding of the appearance of the Imperial Capital from the memory of the Demon Emperor. After all, the Demon Emperor had taken a dragon to serve in the Imperial Capital. Dean led Noise and others to a giant door on the east side of the Imperial Capital. The giant wall of the Imperial Capital was the same as the other giant walls. The difference was that there were 6 giant doors on the 4 sides of the Imperial Capital. Each giant wall was tens of thousands of kilometers away from each other. It showed how vast the area of the Imperial Capital was. It was more than enough to accommodate more than 1 billion people. Dean and God of Wa slowly landed at the giant door on the east side of the Imperial Capital. The nearby forest was relatively sparse. Along the way, there were some good quality armors that were abandoned in the mud. Some were broken armors and some were buried together with their owners. Dean didn't feel strange about the imperial capital even though he hadn't been to the imperial capital through the memory of Crimson Moon and Bioello. He knew that the imperial capital was a warlike place. Ordinary civilians had long been accustomed to hunters. It wasn't like in the giant wall of Sylvia where hunters were reduced to dirty tools of the nobles. In the imperial capital, hunters were a profession. They were more respected than lawyers, doctors, and clergymen. Of course, ordinary hunters were far too common. They couldn't be compared to famous doctors and lawyers. However, those who had reached the level of the Dominator or the Abyss were already considered the #1 figures in the imperial capital. Even the top lawyers wouldn't dare to underestimate such figures. Of course, they wouldn't be too afraid of them either. After all, top-notch lawyers and doctors were all loyal to kings or ancient clans. Naturally, they did not fear the ordinary Abyss. The Lord of the Abyss, on the other hand, was already a behemoth in the imperial capital. It presided over a region, and its wealth and power had reached the pinnacle for them. The only beings that they had to respect were the 7 lords and the demon emperor. The 7 kings were like 7 dazzling stars overlooking the imperial capital. To the commoners, they were like gods in the clouds, and it was an honor to be able to see them. As for the demon emperor, his sense of existence was relatively weak. He hid his strength and was far less dazzling than the 7 kings. However, in the eyes of the top powerhouses, the reverence they felt for the demon emperor was 10 times or even 100 times stronger than when they faced the 7 kings. Dean asked everyone to disguise themselves. They wrapped the few monsters they had hunted along the way and carried them on their shoulders. They pretended that they were hunting prey. Then they slowly walked towards the giant gate. The giant gate of the imperial capital was open all year round. There were many hunters in the imperial capital. A large number of adventurers' groups and adventurers' guilds were formed. They would often form teams to hunt monsters and sell them to the Monster Research Institute and other related institutions in the imperial capital. Or they would bring back the monsters' scales and claws and sell them to blacksmiths to earn some travel expenses. In addition to the independent adventurers, the 7 lords would often lead an army to the depths of the wilderness to kill fierce monsters. They would train the combat ability of the army. Therefore, there were iron hooves and messy footprints everywhere near the giant gate. The air was filled with the smell of metal and human sweat. As they approached the giant gate, Dean saw another team of adventurers returning to the imperial capital. There were 20 or 30 of them. Each of them was carrying a huge bulging backpack. It seemed that they had dismembered the monsters they had hunted. There was a trace of vigilance in the other party's eyes as Dean saw the adventurers. The giant gate was the most chaotic place. The guards didn't care about what was happening outside the gate. Therefore, there were many people lying in ambush outside the gate. They bullied the weak and robbed other people's spoils of war. Dong dong dong. At this time, the ground gently trembled. Dean released his perception and felt a group of beasts rushing out of the giant gate. They passed through the long aisle of the giant gate and appeared in everyone's line of sight. It was a group of knights wearing silver helmets and dark silver armor. The style of the helmet was very strange. There were spikes erected on the helmet, and only a pair of cold eyes could be seen from the armor. Each of the armor's chest was engraved with a bloody forest pattern. Dean knew that this was the badge of the Bloody Thorns King. The knights belonged to the Silver Moon Legion under the command of the Bloody Thorns King. It was a subordinate legion of the Silver Moon Legion. The Bloody Thorns King died in the Federation. It seems that the Bloody Thorns King didn't disband. There are too many kings that have fallen in the Federation. The imperial capital will fall into chaos. The forces and territories of the kings will become ownerless. The other hungry wolves and vultures will probably covet them and want to carve them up. Dean's eyes lit up as he thought about the current situation in the imperial capital. The fall of the king would cause turmoil in the imperial capital. It would also cause a chain reaction at the grassroots level. It was a turbulent period. The demon emperor not only had to guard against his arrival, but also had to rectify the situation in the imperial capital. Dean's mouth curved into a smile as he led Noyce and others into the city. He took out a special gold coin from the imperial capital and threw it to the guard. They went straight into the city. This gold coin wasn't taken from Wall Lord Borja, but he had casually transformed it from the soil on the ground. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that stone could be turned into gold. However, scientists needed to use instruments to change the structure of matter, but he could directly change the structure of his own body through magic, then assimilate the structure of foreign objects, and then change the structure of foreign objects again, turning them into what he wanted. He could use grass to make swords and other weapons. This was his current ability. He was equivalent to a god in terms of the use of his abilities. The only difference between him and a true god was the issue of power. For example, God of Wa could swallow external materials and convert them into her own energy. Although he could do it too, but the latter could convert 10 tons of energy at once. He couldn't convert half a ton and would suffer from indigestion. Dean had been sleeping for 300 years. The imperial capital was built after the disaster. It had a history of more than 200 years. The culture of hunting monsters had already multiplied to the extreme. Dean wasn't in a hurry to find the demon emperor. He took Noyce and others to a bustling residential city near the imperial capital. They ate and drank to their heart's content. Then he took Noyce and others to the trading market where soul worms were sold. In every city, shops selling soul insects could be seen everywhere. However, these shops were not private shops. Instead, they were like the alliance merchants that belonged to the soul insect industry of the 7 great monarchs. All the sale of soul worms had legal rights and interests. Private sale of soul worms was illegal. Anyone who was caught would be sentenced to death. In the trading market, in addition to selling soul worms, there were also shops selling magic marks and all kinds of hunter equipment. It wasn't a secret to use 5 soul worms to strengthen magic marks. Dean saw the banner of the Bloody Thorn King hanging in the trading square. He knew that this was the property of the Bloody Thorn King. He immediately made a token of the Bloody Thorn King and went to the building where the soul worms were sold. Chapter 1235. The interior of the Merchant Union building was incomparably spacious, like a giant shopping mall. As soon as one entered the door, one could see many independent shops with different kinds of soul insects hanging outside. Some specialized in power-type soul insects, some specialized in stealth-type soul insects, and some directly hung the name of a certain legendary soul insect, attracting the attention of many passers-by. Dean led Noyce and others to the 2nd floor. They didn't look at the bottom floor. The bottom floor was the shops run by the powerful families. The real good things were on the 2nd and 3rd floor. The prices were fair and they were equivalent to the official price. The soul worms were genuine and there was no false packaging. The environment on the 2nd floor was obviously quieter than the bottom floor. But there were still many strong hunters wandering around. Dean led Noyce and others to a shop. The service lady's eyes lit up as she saw the large number of people. She knew that it was a big business. She immediately came to greet them. "Sir, what kind of soul worm do you want to see?" Dean raised his hand and took out the blood thorn token. "Tell your manager to come out." The service lady's face changed as she saw the bloody thorn token. She respectfully retreated and informed the shop owner. She contacted the manager of the Merchant Union. The steward of the Merchant Union was a middle-aged man. He was wearing a suit. His face slightly changed as he saw the blood thorn token. He politely said, "I don't know what is the purpose of your visit. Prepare a batch of Arctic worms according to the number of people here." Dean ordered. The middle-aged manager was startled as he glanced at Noyce and others. "Sir, the ice worms are under strict control even in ordinary times. I'm afraid, extraordinary times? Dean looked at him. Let me see. He raised his hand and pinched the forehead of the middle-aged manager. His fingers pierced into the manager's brain to read his memories. The assistants and maids around him were scared. They were about to exclaim when Dean moved his mind. Several snake-like tentacles swept out from his arm and wrapped around their necks, strangling them to death. Dean retracted his palm and looked at the middle-aged manager. Call all the nearby ice worms. Yes, my lord. Middle-aged steward said. Dean had tampered with his memory and turned him into a servant. After a moment, 3 ice worms and more than a dozen legendary soul worms were sent to Dean. There were 2 2-star soul worms and the rest were 1-star legendary soul worms. Dudian let Mason, Aurora, and Sergei choose their favorite legendary soul worm. Then he gave them 3 ice worms and helped them to implant and suppress them. Soon, 3 abyss powerhouses were born in the merchant house. Combat skills needed to be tempered, but physical evolution only required resources. When Dean implanted the soul worms into the 3 of them, he suddenly wondered if he could use his own ability to replicate the extreme ice worm to replace the extreme ice worm's needs. If that was the case, it meant that he could also replicate the extreme ice insect king. Moreover, he could replicate the fighting memory and inject it into the brain of Noyce and others so that they could gain rich fighting experience in an instant. Dean was shocked by this idea. If he could do it, it meant that he could build a world-shaking army at any time. Moreover, it was very likely to be possible. Dean asked the steward of the Merchant Union to seal the building. Only Noyce and him were left in the building. Then he tried to control his body to replicate the gene level to make the ice worm. Very quickly, an extreme ice worm hatched in his palm. It was sparkling and translucent and was a part of his genes. After it was formed, he severed the connection between him and the extreme ice worm, allowing it to become an independent life form. However, although this extreme ice worm had all the external characteristics of an extreme ice worm, it didn't seem to be alive. The extreme ice worm doesn't have a heart. Its structure is more complex than the human body. It would be easy for me to create a heart, but the cells of the extreme ice worm are equivalent to the heart. They can continue to transform and reproduce. The cells that I've constructed can't reproduce independently without my control. Dean frowned. The extreme ice worm that he had constructed could be regarded as a real extreme ice worm. However, the extreme ice worm would die as soon as he cut off the connection with it. Its lifespan was only for a moment. How can I give it life? Dean felt that this was a big problem. However, if he could overcome this problem, it meant that his previous conjecture wouldn't be hindered and he would be able to build a strong army in an instant. I have to create a consciousness in their body if I want them to live. Dean thought of a breakthrough. He weaved a piece of memory and sent it into the body of the extreme ice worm. It didn't take long for the extreme ice worm to crawl slowly. It swam to Dean's feet and intimately rubbed his trousers. Dean's eyes lit up. It was really feasible. Not to mention that the extreme ice worm could replace the real extreme ice worm in the human body. However, the current situation meant that Dean could not only change the structure of various materials such as metal, coal, and so on. He could also create a living life. The structure of the extreme ice worm was much more complex than that of a human. If he could create an extreme ice worm, then wouldn't it mean that he could create a human? If that was the case, then what was the difference between him and a real god? He completely forgot about Noyce and the others around him. He excitedly started to divide and reproduce extra cells through his own cells. He moved them to his palm and constructed a human-like body, and then constructed a beating heart. When he severed the connection, the young man made of flesh and blood that flowed out of his palm stood in a daze. His eyes were empty, but his body exuded a surging vitality, life. Dean was so excited that he stood up. Noyce, Aurora, and the others, as well as their trusted subordinates, were stunned and in disbelief when they saw this strange scene. In addition to shock, they also felt a bit of fear. Dean was so excited that he looked around the young man. He used his X-ray vision to scan every bone and meridian in the young man's body. He found that the structure of the young man's body was no different from that of a human's. While Dean was looking at the young man was also looking at Dean. Suddenly, he raised his hand and touched Dean, as if he wanted to touch the world. Dean grabbed the young man's hand. The young man tried to break free, but his strength couldn't compare to Dean's. The young man was anxious. He tried his best to twist his body, but he couldn't change the situation. He opened his mouth and bit Dean's hand. Dean let go of his hand. He didn't let go because he was afraid that the young man would bite him, but the test was over. Although I didn't fabricate memories for him, but he has been born with primitive instincts. It seems that he is a giant baby. Dean's eyes flashed. So, this young man was an independent life form, creating life. It was incredible, but the young man had accomplished such a thing so easily. It turns out that the myths and legends aren't all false. God is omnipotent. He can create things and create people. Dean muttered. At this moment, he realized the feeling of being a god. So reckless and so powerful. At the same time, he suddenly felt that humans weren't that great, and that life wasn't that precious. Chapter 12:36. Noyce, he will follow you in the future. You will be responsible for teaching him. Dean handed over the young man to Noyce. He wanted to see the difference between the life he had created and a real human being. After all, the young man was a blueprint of the human being. The only difference was that the physique of the young man was equivalent to that of the pioneers. However, there were no magic marks in the young man's body. It was pure physical strength. Noyce was stunned. Young master, is this your ability? Almost. Dean smiled. In the future, you will know that abilities are not single, but ever-changing. In the final analysis, abilities are just the keys to develop your own potential. Noyce, Aurora, and others didn't understand. However, they felt that Dean's ability was simply incredible. He could create ice worms and people out of thin air. Such a method was extremely similar to the creator in the legends. Dean picked up the extreme ice worm by his feet. He thought that since he could create extreme ice worms, it would be easy for him to create legendary soul worms as well. He picked out a few legendary soul worms from Crimson Moon's memory and asked about the abilities that the dark-skinned woman liked and was good at. The dark-skinned woman replied in a trembling voice. She liked frontal combat and was good at violent abilities. Dean selected a type of legendary soul worm that was mainly based on strength and quickly constructed and replicated it. Soon, he created 6 similar legendary soul worms. These soul worms were different from the polar ice worm. They had a unique digestive system and brain nerve. When Dean constructed them together, these organs automatically operated their bodies. They were a living life. Dean let the dark-skinned woman continue to absorb and replace the original magic marks in her body. After a moment, her physique was upgraded from pioneer to dominator level. Then he put the ice worm into her body. After a moment, the dark-skinned woman's physique was upgraded again and she became an abyss. It's really effective. There was a hint of joy in Dean's eyes. When he created the legendary soul worm to upgrade the dark-skinned woman's physique to the dominator realm, he had already guessed and looked forward to it. Now that he had succeeded, he was pleasantly surprised. This meant that he did not need to rely on any external forces. He himself was a huge treasure house that could produce a large number of legendary soul worms and polar ice worms. He could mass-produce powerful abyss. Moreover, he could fabricate fighting memories and input them into the mind of others so that they would have extraordinary fighting skills. They wouldn't need 10 years of hard work to become a powerful master. Omnipotent. It's really omnipotent. Dean couldn't help but laugh. Now that he had peerless power in his hands, his character seemed to be released. He was no longer as depressed as before. Noyce, who was most familiar with Dean, was very sensitive to this point. He was a bit surprised but didn't think much about it. Not only can I cultivate the abyss but also the king. It's not difficult to cultivate a god if I want. However, only a fool would do such a thing. Dean's face was full of smiles. This matter had brought him great confidence. With such a powerful ability, the whole world was not worth mentioning to him. He didn't even care about the coming alien worm. His only hope was to find Aisha as soon as possible. With his current means, he might be able to easily cure the undead virus in her body and help her get back the memories of these years. Thinking of this, he felt the blood in his body boiling. He couldn't wait to move or use his eyes to scan every inch of the soil in the whole empire to find Aisha. However, even with his godlike ability, he couldn't spread his perception to the whole empire. Even covering the whole imperial capital would be extremely difficult. Noyce, give me the Ice Worm King, Dean said to Noyce. Dean had given the Ice Worm King from the bottom of the Ice Dragon Lake to Noyce for safekeeping. Now that he left the giant wall of Balga, he naturally brought it along with him. It was sealed in a transparent alloy can and wrapped in black cloth. Noyce's trusted aide carried it on his back. Noyce quickly nodded and ordered his men to bring the Ice Worm King. Dean lifted the black cloth, and with a swipe of his finger, he tore a gap in the sturdy alloy can. A mass of milky white meat slid out from the inside, squeezed out of the thin crack like a soft body, and after a moment, all the meat was lost to the floor outside the can. The Ice Worm King was paralyzed on the ground like a puddle of mud. However, it seemed to sense something and immediately drilled into the ground to escape. Dean's palm became bigger and grabbed it. Ice Worm King? Haha, it's just a source insect of the extreme ice insect clan. There are at least 80,000 source insects like you that are born in the ice pool, right? Dean smiled faintly and casually said. The extreme Ice Worm King that was overflowing from Dudien's palm was startled when it heard this. Its mucus turned into a mouth and eyes as it looked at Dudien in horror. How do you know about this? I know far more than you can imagine. What I'm curious about is that the Blood Moon has appeared twice in the past 300 years. Your compatriots have also come to the Earth twice. But why are you still hiding at the bottom of the lake? Your spaceship should be able to send and receive signals with the degree of damage. But they didn't come to pick you up. Did they abandon you? Or are they afraid of the origami of the Empire? Dean looked at it. The Ice Worm King was startled. Blood Moon? My compatriots have come twice? How is it possible that they didn't come to find me if they came to the Earth? Nonsense. Dean was a little surprised. This Ice Worm King didn't know about this? He suddenly felt that there seemed to be something strange and other reasons. After thinking for a moment, he directly pierced into its body and looked through its memory. The Ice Worm King felt Dean's tentacles piercing into its body and quickly resisted. However, it found that all parts of its body were invaded. There seemed to be an unknown force pouring into its body and resonating with its body. It was difficult to distinguish which part of its body belonged to itself. Obviously, this strange feeling came from the human in front of it. It was extremely horrified. How could this human grow to such a terrifying level in such a short period of time? After a moment, Dean finally understood the reason. The memory of the Ice Worm King was an eye-opener for him. It turned out that the extraterrestrial magic worm clan was not only divided into Ice Worm and Flame Worm, which were natural enemies. Even within the same clan, the Ice Worm and Flame Worm were not monolithic. Just like humans, there were different factions, and each faction was loyal to a different great sage. The extreme ice insect king in front of him was one of the 12 ice demon insect sages who were loyal to him. Under the command of this great sage, this Ice Worm King was equivalent to a human leader. There were many such leaders. Each leader controlled a spaceship to invade the Earth. The 12 great sages cooperated to invade the Earth together. They captured the Earthlings as materials to become gods. They hoped to cultivate the gods first and destroy the Flame Worms and the Origami clan. Unfortunately, the changes in the war caused cracks in the short-term alliance of the great sages, especially the counterattack of the Earth. The explosion of nuclear weapons gave the Ice Worm a fatal blow. Many great sages withdrew from the Earth. Dean saw the war of 300 years ago more and more clearly. The layers of fog were lifted in front of his eyes. The planet that was once full of human footprints had turned into a planet full of monsters. The culprits and the various purposes behind them had surfaced. It seems that the great sage you're loyal to has most likely died in the war. Dean smiled. So the Ice Worm that controls the Federation should be one of the other sages. I don't know how many sages there are or if there is only one. The Ice Worm King looked at him in horror. Your body is different from before. You have the smell of origami. No, it's even stronger than origami. Godwa, this is for you. It should taste good. Dean didn't answer it. After exploring its memory, it had lost all value to him. It was the most suitable reward for the goddess of Wa. Godwa smiled sweetly like a pure and beautiful girl, but there was a strange hunger in her eyes which made her look slightly enchanting. It was the first time for Noyce and the others to see the expression of this indescribably beautiful girl change. Many of them were stunned. But the next moment, Goddess Wa suddenly opened her mouth. Her red lips suddenly expanded to several meters, revealing her mouth full of sharp teeth. Then, she swallowed the worm in one gulp. The action was so fast that the people who were fascinated by her almost screamed out in fear. Goddess Wa licked her lips and grinned at the crowd, her face full of enjoyment. Many people were so scared that they couldn't help but retreat. Noyce, Aurora and others were scared, but they had been following Dean for a long time. Their courage had been tempered. Although they were scared out of their wits, they quickly restored their calmness. Chapter 12:37. Dean slowly closed his eyes, and the body structure of the extreme Ice Worm King appeared in his mind. In the next moment, his body split into a mass of flesh and blood, and it kept changing. After 10 minutes, the mass of flesh and blood gradually changed into the appearance of the extreme Ice Worm King. When the last step was completed, an Ice Worm King appeared in front of Dean. When the connection was cut off, its body also stopped moving, as if it was dead. Dean didn't input the memory into it. He didn't need the Ice Worm King to work for him. He just needed to use its body to bring strength to Noyce and others and enhance their combat effectiveness. Creating legendary soul worms, extreme ice worms, and extreme Ice Worm King, which was also known as source worms, Dean's construction speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, he had created a set of resources that could allow people to evolve from the abyss to the king stage. Dean handed Noyce over to Noyce. He wanted Noyce to be the first king. With his help, Noyce quickly absorbed the legendary soul worm and evolved his cells. He then absorbed the extreme ice worm and quickly climbed from the lower abyss to the upper abyss. Due to the rapid advancement, Noyce didn't have time to eliminate the impurities that were brought to his body by the soul worm. In less than half an hour, Noyce successfully advanced to king level after absorbing 2 soul worms. Moreover, unlike other kings, Noyce's consciousness wouldn't be disturbed by the Ice Worm King. He would always be free. This exaggerated scene left everyone dumbfounded. It was as if they were watching a show. They were completely dumbfounded. Dean let Noyce use his strength to attack him. After testing, it proved that Noyce indeed had the strength of a king. However, he was very unfamiliar with using it. He hadn't fully controlled the power in his body. Mass production of king level. This is the ability of a god. No wonder the origami and the magic insects are searching for a god. Once they become a god, what can't be solved? Dean was happy, but he couldn't help but sigh. On that day, he asked Goddess Wa to help him. The two of them made soul worms and source worms together. With Dean's speed, he could construct a set of all the resources needed to evolve to the king level every half an hour or so. Goddess Wa only needed 5 or 6 minutes, and her speed was gradually increasing. Dean didn't allow the king level to proliferate. He promoted Aurora, Noyce, Sergei and the others to the king level. As for their cronies, they were given to them to train in the future. Dean thought about the memories he got from the manager of the merchant house. The Demon Emperor did come back to the imperial capital. As for whether he left or not, it was something that the manager didn't know. He got up and left the merchant house. He took Noyce and the others to the imperial capital. The demon kings had fallen, and the demon emperors had secluded themselves in the royal palace. Currently, all kinds of dragons and snakes were rising up in the imperial capital. The Abyss Masters under the command of the Demon Kings, and the Abyss Masters of some ancient families, had all appeared to investigate the situation and attempt to seize the territories left behind by the Demon Kings. Although the banners of the Demon Kings were still flying high, the armies and businesses under them had already been torn apart, and there was endless internal strife. After the Demon Emperor returned, he took action to suppress the turmoil in the imperial capital. However, after that, he stayed in the royal palace for a long time, causing rumors and slanders to spread everywhere. The various experts were still restless. There's only one king left in the imperial capital. He's the only king who didn't participate in the Federation War. After the Demon Emperor is killed, the imperial capital will be a group of dragons without a leader. In Dean's eyes, there was no difference between a king and an ordinary person. His vision and mind had become more open after helping Noyce and the others to evolve their bodies. He had the aura of overlooking everything in the world. Ordinary people cultivated their temperament with their clothes. Rulers cultivated their temperament with their wealth and power. Emperors cultivated their temperament with their territory. Dean led Noyce and the others to the palace. He spread his perception domain to perceive the daily scenes of the imperial capital. 2 hours later they came to the central core area of the imperial capital. The imperial city. Standing outside the city, Dean's perception extended forward and covered the entire imperial city. Soon he felt that the scene in the imperial city was different from the past. It was slightly chaotic. He heard a lot of secret conversations of families and saw a lot of dirty things. Everyone's privacy was exposed in front of his eyes, but he didn't feel it. Dean saw the palace in the center of the imperial city. Everything was in order. Is he still here? Dean's eyes flashed. He thought that the Demon Emperor would escape and stay far away from the imperial capital. After all, the Demon Emperor didn't even care about the Federation's army when he retreated. But now the imperial palace was heavily guarded and there was no sign of chaos. It could be seen that the Demon Emperor was still inside. Dean suddenly understood that the reason why the Demon Emperor abandoned the Federation's army was because he knew that he wouldn't have time to manage the imperial capital. Moreover, the imperial capital would be in turmoil after losing the rule of the 7 kings. If the Demon Emperor brought a large number of troops back, then the turmoil would become more intense. Even before the Demon Emperor attacked the imperial capital, there would be an extremely unbearable situation. If that was the case, then Dean had to admire the determination of the Devil Emperor. He was a ruthless person. Let me see what gives you the confidence to sit in the imperial capital. Dudien's eyes flashed as he strode forward. They entered the imperial city and went all the way to the imperial palace. Dean's perception penetrated all over the imperial palace. He saw a metal spaceship buried deep in the ground. His perception couldn't penetrate into the spaceship, but he searched the entire palace. He only saw a few concubines. He didn't see the shadow of the demon emperor. It seemed that the demon emperor was hiding in the spaceship. Was it a trap or an evasion? Dean didn't rush to attack but looked at Noyce. Go to the Imperial Palace and grab me 2 concubines of the demon emperor. Noyce was stunned. This was the core of the Imperial capital. The strongest person in the Imperial capital lived there. He was also the ruler of the giant wall. But he wanted to go to the palace where the demon emperor lived and grab his concubines? Noyce was surprised, but he quickly nodded as he thought about Dean. His figure disappeared from the place. He passed through the guards in front of the Imperial Palace and went to the depths of the palace. After a while, there was some chaos in the Imperial Palace. Then, Noyce's figure turned back, carrying 2 women who were dressed extremely luxuriously. Even their accessories were extremely luxurious. Both of them were in their early 20s. They were breathtakingly beautiful. There was a special pattern on their faces. Their eyes were indifferent and arrogant. They didn't seem to have any emotion. Although they were embarrassed after being thrown to the ground by Noyce, they soon raised their proud heads. There was a bit of anger on their beautiful and enchanting faces. They glared at Dean. "Who are you? How dare you break into the Imperial Palace? Take off your human skin," Dean indifferently said. He raised his hand and slapped. His 5 fingers were like several sharp blades that slashed out, leaving bloody marks on the 2 women's bodies. Sensing that their lives were in danger, the pupils of the 2 girls constricted. Their clothes were suddenly torn apart, and their bodies expanded, raising a stinky wind like a hurricane. In the blink of an eye, they turned into 2 monsters more than 10 meters tall. Messy tentacles covered their bodies, hideous eyeballs and disordered mouths were everywhere. They were even more horrifying than most of the monsters that were known for their horrifying appearances. They were as beautiful as a god but as ugly as a devil. Noyce, who had personally captured them, was shocked. He didn't expect these 2 beautiful women to be such terrifying and disgusting monsters. Aurora and the others all retreated in fright, frightened by this terrifying image. Dean had seen the true face of the origami from the memories of Crimson Moon, Lin Chongqing, and Boelo. He was not surprised at this moment and was indifferent. He smiled faintly and said, "In your origami race, your image should be considered as beautiful, right?" The 2 origami let out a sharp and ear-piercing cry. It sounded like they were roaring as they pounced towards Dean. Dean's expression was indifferent. He raised his hand and his fingers turned into 2 giant cages. The 2 origami were imprisoned in the cages. Several giant thorns came out from the cages and pierced into the bodies of the 2 origami. It didn't take long for him to read the memories of the 2 origami. "Sure enough, you're back." Dean threw the 2 origami to Goddess Wa. "Here you go." Goddess Wa smiled and raised her hand. Her slender palm became bigger like a strange mouth. There was a bottomless whirlpool in the center of her palm. Dense teeth could be faintly seen. The 2 origami were sucked into the whirlpool. After a moment, her arm returned to its original shape. "Dismantle the spaceship," Dean said to God of Wa. From the memory of the 2 origami, Dean knew that the Demon Emperor was hiding inside the spaceship. With the Demon Emperor's plan, he wouldn't expect a spaceship to be able to protect him. It was most likely a trap. Dean's strength was not the same as before, but he wasn't blindly confident. There were many things that happened when the ship was overturned. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.